The sleek glass doors of the Tesla dealership slid open with a soft swish, a breeze of cool air rushing into the showroom. Inside, the smell of fresh leather and polished steel filled the space. The dealership was quiet, too quiet for a Saturday morning. The salespeople were milling about, phones in hand, eyes glued to their screens. The weekend rush had yet to pick up, and Jeff, the manager, was pacing behind the counter, mentally calculating his sales goals for the month. Jeff had been managing this Tesla dealership for the better part of 5 years. He knew everything there was to know about the cars, the customers, and the business. He had built his reputation on efficiency, on moving the metal, on turning the flashy electric cars into tangible profits. But today felt different. It wasn't just the lack of foot traffic. It was something more elusive, something nagging at the back of his mind. A faint click of footsteps echoed from the entrance, snapping Jeff out of his thoughts. He looked up, narrowing his eyes. A man had entered the showroom. He was dressed in a simple navy blue jacket, a white shirt underneath, and dark jeans. He was of average height, his features sharp but unremarkable, his face calm and neutral. For a second, Jeff didn't think much of him. He had seen all kinds of customers walk in, from the casually dressed to the sharply suited. But something about the way this man moved, with quiet confidence, caught Jeff's attention. The man walked up to the nearest car, running his fingers along the smooth curves of the Model S. His eyes scanned the vehicle with a discerning look, taking in every detail. Jeff observed from behind the counter, a small frown creasing his brow. He could tell this man wasn't just any casual shopper. His presence seemed out of place in the usual crowd of bargain hunters and tech enthusiasts. "Can I help you?" Jeff called out from across the room, his tone more curt than he intended. He wasn't in the mood for wasting time with window shoppers. The man looked up from the car, meeting Jeff's gaze. There was a slight pause before he responded. "I'm just looking for something special." Jeff raised an eyebrow. Special? What did that even mean? He had heard every excuse in the book. People who wanted to test drive, people who were just browsing, and of course, the ones who swore they'd be back for a purchase only to never return. Jeff was used to the routine. "Well, if you're serious about buying, we can set you up with a test drive. Otherwise, I'd ask that you don't waste my time," Jeff said, the impatience creeping into his voice. The man smiled faintly. "I'm serious." There was something about the way he said it, calm, assured, that made Jeff feel an odd sense of unease. But he quickly brushed it off. "Well, let me get one of the salespeople to assist you." He gestured toward one of the younger associates, a man named Derek, who was checking his phone at the far side of the showroom. Jeff turned to leave, but then something stopped him. There was a flicker of recognition in the stranger's eyes, something Jeff couldn't quite place. It wasn't like he knew the man personally, but there was something oddly familiar about him. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe he had seen him on the news or somewhere online. Before he could give it another thought, Jeff shook his head and called over to Derek. "Derek, take care of this one." As Derek walked toward the customer, Jeff turned back to his desk. He had more important things to focus on, like trying to push for higher numbers this month. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few minutes passed, and the conversation between Derek and the man grew louder. Jeff could make out fragments of their words. Derek was offering the man a deal on a new Model 3, but the man wasn't showing much interest. He was too focused on the cars themselves, asking in-depth questions about the technology, the battery life, and the autopilot system. Then, just as Jeff was about to sit back down and return to his thoughts, he heard a voice. A deep, calm voice that cut through the low hum of the dealership. "Excuse me, sir," the man said. Jeff looked up. "I'm afraid I'm not interested in the test drive just yet, but I do have a question." Jeff raised an eyebrow. "Sure. What's your question?" The man smiled, a strange glint in his eyes. "Do you know who I am?" It was an odd question, but Jeff didn't think much of it at first. "I have no idea. Should I?" The man's smile grew, but there was something unsettling about it. It was almost like a warning. "I think you might want to reconsider kicking me out of your dealership." Jeff's stomach sank. He had only been in this business for a short while, but he was already used to customers making demands and throwing tantrums. But something about this situation felt different. He didn't like the way the man was looking at him. There was an air of authority in his gaze, something Jeff hadn't seen in most customers. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jeff replied, his voice tightening. "Oh, I think you do," the man said, his voice dripping with calm amusement. "And when you find out who I am, you might want to rethink the way you're treating me." Jeff felt a pang of discomfort. He had no idea who this guy was, but he was starting to feel like maybe he had just messed up. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Derek approaching him, looking confused. "Jeff, I think you might want to see this." Derek handed Jeff a tablet, and Jeff's eyes went wide as he saw the headline on the screen. "Elon Musk buys Tesla dealership and kicks off new era of innovation." It hit Jeff like a ton of bricks. He stared at the screen for a long, stunned moment. When he looked up, the man, Elon Musk, was gone. The realization hit him. He had just kicked out the owner of Tesla. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jeff leaned back in his office chair, staring at the tablet in his hands, as if it might suddenly reveal a way out of the situation. But no matter how many times he glanced at the headline, it didn't change. The man he had just dismissed from the showroom wasn't just any customer. He was Elon Musk, the very owner of the company that had been the source of Jeff's livelihood for the past 5 years. His palms were sweating, and his mind raced, replaying the moment over and over. How had he been so blind? So arrogant? He had no idea what kind of trouble he might be in now. But, as he sat there, the pressure building in his chest, Jeff tried to remember how he'd gotten here. How he'd built this career. How he had gotten so far up in this world of fast cars and bigger egos. It wasn't a simple story. It never was. Jeff had come from a small town in Ohio, the son of a high school teacher and a stay-at-home mom. They weren't rich by any means, but they'd taught him the value of hard work. Jeff had been the kind of kid who loved cars from the start. He was fascinated by the way they worked, the way they could transform a person's day, change their mood, their outlook. To Jeff, cars weren't just about getting from one place to another. They were about power, freedom, and the thrill of the open road. His dream, since he was 12 years old, had been to one day manage a car dealership. He didn't care which brand, just that it would be his. The dream seemed so far out of reach, though, like something only people with silver spoons could ever hope for. But Jeff wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. In high school, he worked part-time at a local garage, sweeping floors and organizing tools just to get a taste of the industry. He saved up every dime, determined that he'd eventually work his way up. After high school, he'd move to the city, enrolling in a local business program while simultaneously taking a job as a junior sales associate at a luxury car dealership. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door, and Jeff was relentless. His charm and quick thinking set him apart from the other salespeople. He was known for being able to close deals in the most difficult of circumstances. Soon enough, he was promoted to manager. But Jeff didn't just want to be a regular manager. He wanted to be the best. The name on the dealership had to be associated with his success. So when the opportunity to manage a Tesla dealership came up 5 years ago, Jeff jumped on it. Tesla was the future, and he knew it. The cars, the tech, the innovation. It was everything Jeff had always dreamed of. Under his leadership, the dealership had started seeing consistent growth. He'd turned it into one of the highest-performing Tesla dealerships in the region, earning a reputation for his no-nonsense approach to sales. He was tough on his staff, demanding perfection, but he expected nothing less from himself. His team respected him, even if they didn't always like him. And in the cutthroat world of sales, that was all that mattered. Yet despite his success, Jeff had never been able to shake the feeling that something was missing. The rush of a big sale, the thrill of beating his own numbers, had started to feel hollow. Over the past few months, he'd been questioning his approach. Was he doing the right thing? Was he running this dealership the way it should be run? Or was he just another cog in the machine, chasing numbers without a bigger purpose? But all of that, every thought, every doubt, seemed insignificant now. What mattered was that Jeff had just made the biggest mistake of his career, and it wasn't something he could undo. As the minutes passed, Jeff felt a mix of anger and embarrassment simmering within him. Anger at himself for not recognizing the significance of that man. He was Elon Musk. How could he have missed that? And embarrassment, because now, no matter how much he wished he could take it back, he knew this wasn't something that would just blow over. There would be consequences. There always were. A knock at the door snapped Jeff out of his thoughts. He quickly stood up, smoothing his suit jacket as if that would somehow make him appear more in control. "Come in," Jeff called out, his voice a little shakier than he intended. The door opened, and Derek, one of the junior salespeople, stepped inside. His face was tense, his expression a mix of concern and uncertainty. He closed the door behind him and hesitated before speaking. "Jeff, I think we need to talk," Derek said, his voice low. Jeff ran a hand through his hair, trying to maintain his composure. "I know what you're going to say. I messed up. Big time." Derek didn't respond immediately. Instead, he simply handed Jeff his phone. On the screen was a message that made Jeff's stomach churn. "Elon Musk is the new owner of this dealership. He has made a few changes. Prepare for the next meeting." Jeff stared at the text, his heart dropping. It was real. The man he had so callously kicked out wasn't just another customer. He was the new owner, and now Jeff was trapped in a situation he couldn't control. "Do you think he's going to fire me?" Jeff asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know why he felt like he needed an answer from Derek, but the silence in the room felt unbearable. Derek took a step forward, his eyes sympathetic. "I don't know, Jeff, but I think you need to apologize, and I think you need to do it soon. I've never seen him like that before." He didn't even raise his voice, but there was something about the way he looked at you. Jeff clenched his fists. He hated feeling out of control, hated being at the mercy of someone else. He had spent so long building this life, this career, and now it felt like it could all come crashing down in an instant. "I'll fix this," Jeff said, trying to sound confident. But deep down, he knew the damage was already done. No apology could undo the way he had treated the man who now owned the dealership. Derek nodded slowly, offering a final look of concern before leaving the room. Jeff stood there for a moment, staring at the empty doorway. His mind raced, and he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was bigger than a bad sale, bigger than losing a customer. This was about power, and it was a power Jeff hadn't fully understood until now. He had been in control for so long. But now, the game had changed. Jeff stared at the empty space where Derek had just been standing, his mind whirling. The weight of the last few hours hung over him like a thick fog. Every decision he'd made that day felt wrong. Every word he'd said to that man, Elon Musk, echoed in his head like a constant reminder of his mistake. He couldn't shake the feeling that his entire career was teetering on the edge, ready to crumble at any moment. But what bothered him more than anything was how quickly things had escalated. One moment, everything had been business as usual. The showroom was quiet. The cars were polished and gleaming. The sales targets were achievable, and Jeff had just been going through the motions, as he did every day. Then, out of nowhere, this man walked in, and suddenly everything shifted. The stakes weren't just about hitting numbers anymore. They were about something much bigger. A part of him wondered if Elon Musk had been testing him. Maybe it was a power play, some sort of strange initiation to see how Jeff would react under pressure. Or maybe, just maybe, Musk was trying to gauge how much the dealership truly valued him as a manager. Jeff had no way of knowing, but one thing was clear. He had not passed whatever test had been set. The ringing of his phone broke his spiraling thoughts. Jeff hesitated for a moment before answering, his gut telling him it wasn't going to be good news. "Jeff." The voice on the other end of the line was cold and professional, too professional. It was Veronica, the regional director for Tesla's sales division. "Yeah, Veronica. What's going on?" Jeff replied, trying to keep his voice steady, though the tension in his shoulders was palpable. "We need to talk about the situation with Mr. Musk," she said, her tone not leaving room for pleasantries. "I've been notified about the incident, and I'd like you to come down to the headquarters for a meeting. Now." The word incident hit Jeff like a slap in the face. He could already feel the tension in his chest tightening, his breathing becoming shallow. He ran a hand through his hair again, trying to remain calm. "I understand," Jeff said, but his mind was already racing. He knew that whatever was about to come next, it wasn't going to be good. "I'll head over now." He hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, running through every possible scenario in his mind. This wasn't just about a misplaced interaction with a customer. This was about the fact that the customer had been Elon Musk. And now, Tesla's top brass were involved. For a moment, Jeff's thoughts turned inward. How had he gotten here? He'd worked so hard, climbed the ladder, built his reputation from the ground up. But now, he felt like everything was slipping through his fingers. Was it really just one mistake that could unravel everything? Could one wrong move cost him everything he had worked for? As he stood up and grabbed his jacket, Jeff felt the weight of his past decisions bearing down on him. He had never been the type to back down from a challenge. He had always found a way to push through the toughest situations. This would have to be no different. But this time, it felt different. The car ride to Tesla's headquarters was the longest 20 minutes of Jeff's life. The usual excitement he felt on his way to a big meeting had been replaced with dread. The familiar sights of the city blurred by as his thoughts consumed him, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. He couldn't help but replay the confrontation in his mind. How calm Musk had been, how effortlessly he'd walked out, leaving Jeff standing there, stunned and speechless. And then, there was the cold message from Veronica. A meeting at headquarters meant only one thing. Jeff was in deep trouble. When Jeff arrived, the sleek, modern building loomed ahead of him, its glass and steel structure gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. The headquarters was a monument to success, a symbol of the company's forward-thinking approach to business. Jeff had always admired Tesla from a distance, but now, standing in front of it, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the wrong side of it. Inside, the atmosphere was sterile and efficient. There was no room for small talk in the sleek, minimalist lobby. A few employees milled about, but the space was quiet, almost too quiet. Jeff approached the receptionist, a woman with a sharp smile and a professional air. "I'm here to see Veronica," Jeff said, trying to keep his nerves in check. The receptionist nodded, typing something into her computer before gesturing toward the elevator. "She's expecting you. The meeting will be in the executive suite on the top floor." Jeff's stomach churned as he stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft ping. He pressed the button for the top floor, watching as the numbers climbed slowly, each one marking his descent deeper into the unknown. When the elevator doors finally opened, Jeff was greeted by a sleek, modern hallway with glass walls and polished floors. He followed the signs to the executive suite, where he was met by another receptionist, who nodded curtly and gestured toward a large conference room at the end of the hall. As Jeff walked into the room, he saw Veronica sitting at the head of the table, her posture perfect and her expression unreadable. Beside her sat two other figures, strangers to Jeff, but their suits and sharp looks told him they were important. One was a man with short, salt-and-pepper hair, wearing a tailored navy suit, and the other was a woman in her early 40s, with short, platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. "Jeff," Veronica said coolly as he entered the room, "please have a seat." He sat down at the table, feeling the weight of their gazes on him. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Jeff cleared his throat, trying to appear composed, but his hands were slick with sweat. "Jeff, we've reviewed the incident with Mr. Musk," Veronica began, her voice businesslike, "and it's clear that you've made a significant mistake. We're not sure what kind of personal issues may have led to this situation, but the fact remains that you've caused an unnecessary conflict with one of the most important people in our company." Her words stung, but Jeff didn't interrupt. He knew this wasn't the time to argue. He had to be careful. "Mr. Musk is not one to hold grudges," Veronica continued, "but he also doesn't tolerate disrespect. What you did today cannot be undone, but we need to hear your side of the story." Jeff took a deep breath, preparing to speak. This was his chance to explain himself, to make things right. He had to try. For the dealership. For his career. Jeff's palms were clammy as he sat in the sleek, glass-walled conference room. The tension was thick, the silence almost suffocating. The voices of Veronica and the two other executives had faded into a blur as his mind raced, still reeling from the fact that he had dismissed Elon Musk without realizing who he was. The gravity of the situation was finally hitting him, and he couldn't deny it anymore. His career was hanging by a thread. Veronica's cold gaze never wavered as she watched Jeff. The platinum blonde woman at the table, whom Jeff hadn't yet learned the name of, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She glanced at her tablet, typing something, but her eyes were still sharp, watching him like a hawk. The man beside her, the older one with salt and pepper hair, seemed the least affected by Jeff's presence, but the way he drummed his fingers on the tabletop gave away his impatience. "Jeff," Veronica said, breaking the silence, her voice colder than before, "you've been with Tesla for a significant amount of time. You've built this dealership up from the ground. And yet, you made a choice today that could destroy everything you've worked for." Jeff opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was still processing the fact that Elon Musk, the very man he dismissed like just another unimportant customer, now owned the dealership. The confusion was still clouding his thoughts, and the intense pressure in the room made it hard to think clearly. "Elon Musk doesn't need to prove himself to anyone," Veronica continued, her voice hard, like she was speaking to a child who disappointed her. "But you were hired to manage this dealership, to ensure things ran smoothly. And now, there's a lot of uncertainty. Your actions have consequences, Jeff. And Musk, as the new owner, has decided to make some changes." Jeff's heart skipped a beat. Changes? What kind of changes? His mind couldn't help but race ahead, imagining the worst-case scenarios. Would he be fired on the spot? Would Tesla even allow him to keep his job after a blunder like this? Before Jeff could respond, the man with the salt and pepper hair spoke up. His voice was low and deliberate, carrying an air of authority. "Jeff, we understand that mistakes happen. But when it comes to dealing with someone like Musk, you can't afford to get things wrong. He's not just a businessman. He's a visionary, a force to be reckoned with. And from what we've gathered, you don't seem to fully appreciate the weight of his influence. But that's about to change. And it's your job to adapt, or there won't be a place for you here anymore." The words cut deep. Jeff felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He had always prided himself on being adaptable. He had risen through the ranks by making quick decisions and taking charge in moments of crisis. But this wasn't just any crisis. This was a crisis involving Elon Musk, and Jeff was terrified of what would come next. The blonde woman finally spoke, her voice sharp and direct. "Elon Musk doesn't just buy companies. He reinvents them. He doesn't make decisions lightly, and he certainly doesn't tolerate incompetence. If you think you can keep running this dealership like you've been doing, you're mistaken. He's already begun implementing changes that you'll have to adapt to, starting now." Jeff's mind raced as his eyes flicked from one person to the next. This wasn't just about a bad interaction anymore. This was about his whole future. He had no idea what Musk had planned, but it was clear that Jeff's understanding of how things worked at Tesla was about to be completely upended. Veronica leaned forward slightly, her piercing gaze locking with his. "You have a choice, Jeff. You can either embrace the changes Musk wants to make and prove that you can evolve with the company, or you can continue down the path you're on and risk losing everything. The decision is yours." The weight of those words settled heavily on Jeff's shoulders. His whole life had been about climbing the ladder, getting ahead, proving himself, showing everyone that he was capable of being the best. Now, it seemed like the ladder had been pulled out from under him. "What changes exactly?" Jeff finally managed to ask, his voice low but laced with curiosity. He needed to understand what he was up against, to know if there was any chance he could salvage this. Veronica exchanged a brief glance with the older man, who gave a subtle nod. She then turned her attention back to Jeff. "The first change involves the sales model. Musk wants to shift how we approach customer interactions. There will be no more rigid, transactional sales pitches. Instead, it will be about creating a relationship. Tesla is about the future, Jeff, and we need to build trust with our customers. We can't keep doing things the way we always have." Jeff swallowed hard. This wasn't what he had expected. He was used to fast deals, quick sales, and moving inventory. He had always believed that the key to success was in closing sales as efficiently as possible. The idea of building relationships was a far cry from what he'd been taught. Second, Veronica continued, Musk is looking at a complete overhaul of the team. He wants to build a culture of innovation, not just sales. He wants employees who are passionate about the technology, who believe in what we're doing. This isn't a car dealership anymore. It's a movement. And if you can't get on board with that vision, you're not going to last long here. The words hit Jeff like a punch to the gut. This was a complete shift in everything he had known, everything he had built. A culture of innovation? Musk wanted to turn the dealership into something more than just a place to sell cars. He wanted it to be a hub for ideas, for change. Jeff had always been good at managing numbers, not ideas. Lastly, Veronica said, her voice even more steely now, Musk has decided that a new direction is needed for leadership. There will be a new team in place to oversee these changes, and you'll be expected to work with them. This is about adapting to Musk's vision of the future. There's no room for hesitation. The air in the room felt thick with anticipation as Jeff processed everything they just said. His mind was in overdrive, racing to catch up with what was happening. His career, his life, it was all changing, and he had no choice but to go along for the ride. So, what does that mean for me? Jeff asked, his voice sounding more defeated than he intended. What happens to me in all of this? Veronica's expression softened just slightly, but it was still a look of professionalism. It means that you're not out of the game yet, Jeff, but you need to prove that you're willing to evolve with the company. You need to show Musk that you understand his vision. If you can do that, you'll have a place here. If not, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Jeff felt a small flicker of hope in his chest, though it was quickly drowned by the overwhelming uncertainty. His whole life had been about following a set path, achieving goals one by one. Now, the path ahead was murky, uncharted, but he was determined to survive. If he had to change everything about how he approached his job, then that's what he would do. He wasn't going to let Elon Musk, or anyone else, decide his fate. He would prove himself. The room fell silent as Jeff gathered his thoughts. He had a long road ahead of him, but there was no turning back now. The tension in the conference room lingered like a storm cloud, and for a moment, Jeff felt like he couldn't breathe. The weight of Veronica's words, "Prove yourself or lose everything," pressed down on him, suffocating him from the inside. This wasn't just about adapting to change. This wasn't just about shifting the sales model or overhauling the team. This was about his very identity, his sense of purpose. Everything he had worked for, everything he had built, was suddenly on the line. His palms were slick with sweat as he gripped the edge of the table. He wanted to say something, anything, to take control of the situation, but the words wouldn't come. His thoughts were a tangled mess of fear, confusion, and disbelief. How had things spiraled so quickly? One small mistake, one casual dismissal of the most powerful man in the industry, and now his entire future was hanging by a thread. Jeff started, his voice cracking under the weight of everything he was feeling. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. I'm not sure where to even start. The silence that followed felt deafening. Veronica's expression softened just a little, but it was clear that she wasn't about to let him off the hook. You start by understanding that this is bigger than you, Jeff. This is about Tesla's future. This is about adapting or falling behind. The words stung, but they also ignited something in Jeff. He had spent his entire career overcoming obstacles. He had fought tooth and nail to get to where he was, and he wasn't about to let this moment be the end of him. If anything, it was going to be the beginning of something bigger. Okay, Jeff said, his voice steadying as he leaned forward. I get it. I made a huge mistake, and now I have to fix it. But how? How do I fix something like this? What does he want from me? What does Musk want from me? The platinum blonde woman across from him, whose name was finally revealed to be Megan, exchanged a quick glance with Veronica. Megan was the one to speak up. It's not about you fixing it, Jeff. It's about us fixing it. Musk has a vision, and if you can align with that, then you'll have a place in it. But you can't expect to stay the same person you were before. This is a complete shift in how we do business, and you need to be on board with that. Every single step. Jeff's heart was pounding in his chest. He wanted to scream out that he was trying, that he understood. But the weight of their stares kept him grounded. He had been handed an opportunity to prove himself, to change everything about his approach, to become something greater than he had ever imagined. And yet, all he could feel was the deep, gnawing fear that he would fail. So, you're telling me I have to completely change the way I run this dealership? Jeff asked, almost in disbelief. The sales model, the team structure, Everything? And all of this has to be done. What? Overnight. The man with salt and pepper hair, whose name Jeff had now learned was Brian, sighed and rubbed his temples. Musk doesn't want this done overnight, Jeff. But he also doesn't want to see another standard car dealership run on autopilot. He wants innovation. He wants the future. That's why we're here. Jeff sat back in his chair, his mind spinning. The magnitude of it all was beginning to settle in, and he felt the weight of each word Veronica, Brian, and Megan had said. The next few months would determine everything. This was no longer just about fixing his career. It was about transforming it, adapting to the future, or losing everything. The silence between them grew thick once again. For what felt like an eternity, no one spoke. Jeff's mind raced with possibilities. He had no idea what the future looked like, but he knew he had to dive in head first. There was no other choice. He couldn't lose this. He wouldn't. I understand, Jeff said finally, breaking the silence. His voice had regained some of its confidence. He wasn't fully convinced of everything yet, but he knew this was the moment he either took control or let everything slip through his fingers. He looked directly at Veronica. I'm in. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. I'll align with Musk's vision. But I need help. I can't do this alone. I'm going to need guidance. I'm going to need a team that's just as committed to this new direction as I am. Veronica gave him a sharp nod, her eyes narrowing slightly. That's the right attitude, Jeff. But understand this. You won't get the support you need unless you prove you're fully on board. This isn't just about putting on a mask. You need to genuinely believe in the direction we're heading. Otherwise, it won't work. Megan added, her voice quieter but no less authoritative. You'll have support, Jeff. But it's up to you to make sure that support is worthwhile. Musk is a visionary, and he only works with those who can see beyond the present. This isn't just about adapting for the sake of it. It's about reshaping everything you've known about business. And that's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable. But if you truly want to stay here, if you want to be a part of Tesla's future, you'll have to trust the process. Jeff's heart pounded in his chest as the gravity of their words sank in. His future was no longer in his hands alone. It was intertwined with Musk's grand vision, with a future he could barely comprehend, but one that he was now a part of. The fear and confusion he had felt earlier began to fade, replaced with a renewed sense of determination. There was something powerful about this moment, something that resonated deeply within him. For the first time in a long while, Jeff realized that he wasn't just managing a dealership anymore. He was standing on the precipice of something revolutionary. And if he could learn to embrace the changes, he would not only survive this storm, he would thrive in it. But as Veronica's words echoed in his mind, he knew that the real test was yet to come. The road ahead would not be easy, and the challenges would be immense. But if he could learn to innovate, to break free from the old ways of thinking, he might just be able to turn this around. It was all up to him now. The morning after the tense meeting, Jeff sat at his desk, staring at the sea of emails and messages that had accumulated overnight. The dealership was operating as usual, but it felt as if everything had shifted under his feet. The buzz of the business, the calls, the emails, the relentless ticking of time, now felt muted, almost irrelevant. The cold reality of the past few days still hung over him like a thick fog. The looming presence of Musk, the weight of Veronica's words, the pressure of transforming everything he knew into something that fit Musk's far-reaching vision. It was all too much to process in one sitting. But Jeff didn't have the luxury of time. He had committed to this, and now he had to move forward, even if it meant walking into the unknown. As he scrolled through the emails, one subject line caught his attention: Tesla Leadership Initiative, New Team Assignments and Expectations. He clicked it, his stomach sinking as he read through the email. It was official. There would be a leadership reshuffling within the dealership, new management positions, and new expectations. He would be working directly with the new team Musk had selected, and the email hinted at a new framework for how the dealership would function. It wasn't just about sales anymore. It was about aligning with the broader Tesla mission, a mission that stretched far beyond just selling cars. Jeff rubbed his temples and leaned back in his chair. He knew that embracing this new culture meant letting go of everything he had once held dear in the business world. No more hard-driving sales pitches. No more cutthroat competition. It was a revolution, and Jeff had to choose whether he would be a part of it or get swept away by the tide. The door to his office opened, and his assistant, Claire, stepped inside. She was one of the few people at the dealership who had been there from the beginning. Someone who had witnessed Jeff's rise, his victories, and his moments of doubt. "Hey, Jeff," Claire said softly, walking toward his desk. "I've been meaning to check in on you. How's everything going? After the meeting yesterday, well, I know things must be a bit overwhelming." Jeff looked up at her, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself to show a sliver of vulnerability. "It's a lot," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I feel like the ground has been ripped out from under me, Claire. I've been in control for so long, but now everything is changing. Musk's vision, the restructuring, the new team. It's everything I've ever known, turned upside down." Claire sat across from him, her expression sympathetic. "I can only imagine how tough it must feel. But, Jeff, I've seen you adapt to change before. Remember when we first opened this dealership? There were moments when it seemed impossible, but you pushed through. This is just a new kind of challenge." Jeff stared at Claire for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. He had faced obstacles before, some big, some small, but he had always found a way to push through. This wasn't any different, was it? "But this is different, Claire," Jeff muttered. "This isn't just a few tweaks or some new strategies. This is about changing everything. The way we interact with customers, the culture of the dealership, even the leadership structure. It feels like I'm being asked to completely reinvent myself." "I'm not sure I can do that." Claire leaned forward, her eyes kind. "You don't have to do it all at once. It's okay to take it step by step, and you don't have to do it alone. You have a whole team here that's ready to support you. I'm here. Everyone here wants to see you succeed. Don't forget that." Her words were a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty Jeff was swimming in. The tension that had been building in his chest seemed to loosen just a little. Claire's unwavering belief in him was a reminder that he wasn't alone in this. He wasn't the only one facing these changes. The whole dealership, everyone who worked there, would need to adapt together. As the morning wore on, Jeff began to shift his mindset. Instead of focusing on the enormity of the changes, he focused on the small steps he could take right now to start moving forward. He couldn't change everything overnight. No one expected him to, but he could start by communicating with his team, showing them the new vision, and helping them understand how the dealership would function moving forward. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. Later that afternoon, Jeff stood in front of the dealership floor, a place he had stood 1,000 times before. But today felt different. Today, he wasn't just a manager. He was a leader, one who had to guide his team through a period of uncertainty. As the employees gathered around, Jeff felt a knot form in his stomach. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves, before speaking. "Team," he began, his voice clear, "I know things have been a bit strange lately, and I know you've all heard the rumors. There are a lot of changes coming. Changes that may seem drastic, but they're necessary. And while it's going to be hard, it's also an opportunity for all of us to grow and redefine what this dealership is all about." He paused for a moment, looking around at the faces before him. Some were skeptical, others hopeful. They didn't know what to expect, but they were all listening. "I won't lie to you. These changes are going to be uncomfortable, but they're also exciting. We're not just selling cars anymore. We're selling the future. And every single one of you is a part of that. We're going to build something special here. And it starts with us. I need each of you to be all in, just like I am. Together, we can make this work." Jeff's words seemed to settle over the team like a wave, calming the uncertainty in the room. There was still doubt, but there was also a flicker of excitement. They could feel his sincerity, his commitment to the future. Later that evening, as Jeff walked out of the dealership and into the parking lot, he felt a small sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much yet, just the first step, but it was something. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time since the meeting with Veronica, Brian, and Megan, Jeff felt like he could breathe again. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to back down. He had a team behind him, a vision in front of him, and a chance to create something incredible, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. The next few weeks passed by in a blur of meetings, emails, and endless adjustments to the dealership's operations. Jeff had expected change to be difficult, but the reality of it was far more overwhelming than he could have ever imagined. Each day seemed to bring a new challenge, one more complication in a series of hurdles that never seemed to stop. The first change Jeff tackled head-on was the restructuring of the sales floor. Musk's vision was clear. Salespeople weren't just sellers anymore. They were ambassadors for the Tesla brand. Every interaction, every conversation with a customer had to reflect the values of innovation, sustainability, and the future. The old model of high-pressure sales tactics and quotas was out the window. In its place was an emphasis on education, on building a relationship with customers, and on selling them not just a car, but a vision for a better future. For Jeff, this meant sitting down with his team and guiding them through the transition. He had to remind himself that they were all in this together, even though many of them were unsure about the new approach. He felt the weight of their doubts. After all, it wasn't easy to abandon the old methods that had been so ingrained in their day-to-day routine. But Jeff had learned something important over the past few weeks. Change wasn't about expecting everyone to jump on board instantly. It was about making small adjustments and leading by example. "All right, everyone," Jeff said one morning during a team meeting. "We're doing things differently now. We're no longer just selling cars. We're creating a connection with our customers. Every conversation you have needs to feel genuine. Don't sell them a car. Sell them a dream, a better future. We're here to make a difference." And that means understanding Tesla's mission, understanding the technology, and making sure our customers do too. The silence that followed his words was deafening. Jeff looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each of his team members. Some of them nodded slowly, but others looked uncertain, almost skeptical. He knew it wasn't going to be easy to get everyone on board. Some people were just set in their ways, unwilling to budge. But Jeff knew that this was the right direction. He had to push through, even if it meant walking alone at times. As the days went on, Jeff spent more time on the floor, working with his salespeople, showing them how to engage with customers in a way that aligned with Musk's vision. It was slow progress at first, but little by little, the team began to catch on. They started asking questions, getting excited about the technology, and learning how to talk to customers in a way that felt authentic. But it wasn't just about the salespeople. The entire dealership had to change. The service department, too, needed to adapt to the new culture. Tesla was about more than just selling cars. It was about providing a holistic experience, one that focused on long-term customer satisfaction and creating a community around the brand. Jeff knew this wouldn't be easy. It wasn't just about selling a product. It was about selling a lifestyle, a future that the dealership had to live and breathe every single day. It was in one of these meetings with the service team when Jeff encountered a pivotal moment, one that made him realize just how deep the change ran. The manager of the service department, a man named Dave, was resistant to the idea of overhauling the service process. "This is ridiculous, Jeff," Dave said. His arms crossed stubbornly as he leaned against the back wall. "You can't just expect people to change the way they've been doing things for years. We've built a reputation for being fast and efficient, and now you want us to focus on community and experience? That's not what people come to us for. They want their car fixed quickly and done right. Period." Jeff paused, considering his words carefully. He had always prided himself on being able to think on his feet, to adapt when things got tough. But this wasn't just another business problem. This was the heart of Tesla's new direction, and it wasn't something he could let slide. "Dave, I get it," Jeff said, his voice calm but firm. "But if we don't change, we risk falling behind. Tesla isn't just about selling cars. It's about creating an ecosystem. It's about a commitment to sustainability, to innovation, and to creating a customer experience that goes beyond just fixing their cars. People come to us for the Tesla experience, and that experience doesn't end when they leave the dealership. We're here for the long haul. And that means we need to change how we look at service, too." Dave was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the floor as if weighing the enormity of what Jeff was saying. Finally, he looked up, his expression softening. "I see your point, Jeff. But this isn't going to be easy." Jeff smiled slightly. "Nothing worthwhile ever is." That day, something shifted. Dave wasn't fully on board yet, but he was willing to try. That was enough for Jeff. Slowly, The service team began to embrace the idea of creating an elevated customer experience, one that reflected Tesla's brand identity. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the weeks turned into months, Jeff continued to work tirelessly to steer the dealership in the right direction. The early resistance began to melt away as the team saw the results. Customer satisfaction ratings went up. Sales numbers began to rise. People weren't just buying cars, they were buying into the vision. They were buying into a future that was smarter, cleaner, and more sustainable. And Jeff couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he watched it all unfold. But even as things started to turn around, Jeff knew this journey was far from over. The road ahead was still filled with uncertainty. Musk's vision was vast, and the future of the dealership was still in flux. But Jeff was no longer afraid of the unknown. He had embraced the challenge, and with each small success, he found the courage to take the next step. He had learned that success wasn't just about making the right decisions. It was about being willing to fail, to stumble, and to get back up again. It was about embracing the unseen path, even when it was unclear, and knowing that if he kept moving forward, he would find his way. And that, for Jeff, was enough. The ripple effect from the changes Jeff had implemented was becoming more apparent every day. The dealership floor, once a sea of transactional interactions, had transformed into a place where people were excited to learn, to engage, and to share in the future that Tesla promised. It was more than just selling cars. It was about selling a vision, a mission that people could rally behind. And despite the rocky start, Jeff could see it starting to take root. As he walked through the dealership floor one afternoon, he observed a group of salespeople gathered around a Tesla Model 3, animatedly discussing the features with a young couple who were clearly enthusiastic about the car. It wasn't just about the sales pitch anymore. It was a conversation, a shared excitement. The salespeople weren't pushing the car. They were showing it as a solution to the couple's desire for sustainability, efficiency, and innovation. Jeff smiled to himself. It had taken time, but he could see the shift happening. Still, the changes weren't without their challenges. Not everyone was completely on board. The process of transforming the dealership into a reflection of Tesla's bold, forward-thinking vision was a long road, and there were setbacks. One of the biggest hurdles Jeff faced was the tech-savvy nature of Tesla's customers. Many people who walked into the dealership had done their research, often knowing more about the cars than some of the employees. While this was empowering for some, it created friction for others, especially those who were used to more traditional methods of selling. One of the more experienced salespeople, Tom, had been struggling with the new approach. Tom was good at what he did. He had built strong customer relationships over the years, but the technology side of Tesla was a different animal. He had always relied on intuition and experience to close deals, but now he was being asked to know the specs of each model inside and out, to understand Tesla's software, and to explain it to customers who seemed to know even more than he did. Jeff noticed Tom's frustration during a meeting one afternoon when the topic of technology and customer engagement came up. "Jeff," Tom said, his voice a little tight with annoyance, "I've been doing this for years. I'm great with people, but I can't keep up with all these updates. I'm getting questions I don't even know how to answer, and it's only getting worse." Jeff took a deep breath. He understood Tom's frustration. It was hard to feel like you were losing ground when you'd spent so many years honing your craft. But this was bigger than just selling cars. This was about embracing the future, a future that required constant learning and adaptation. "Tom," Jeff said, his voice calm but firm, "I know this is difficult, but the world's changing. People aren't just buying cars. They're buying into a future that's connected, intelligent, and sustainable. The technology behind these cars is a huge part of that. And I'm not asking you to become a tech expert overnight, but we all need to stay one step ahead of our customers. We need to be able to talk to them, to help them understand what makes Tesla different." Tom looked skeptical but nodded, begrudgingly accepting the challenge. "I get that, Jeff. I really do. But what if I can't keep up?" Jeff leaned forward, meeting Tom's gaze with a seriousness that surprised even him. "Then we all help each other. No one here is going through this alone. You've been a great salesperson for years, and I know you can learn the tech side of things. And if you don't know something, you ask. I'm right here, and so is the rest of the team. We're in this together. We're building something new. We'll help each other adapt, but we can't go back. The room fell silent for a moment before Tom sighed. All right, Jeff. I'll give it a shot. I'll try harder to keep up. It wasn't a full-on endorsement, but it was a step in the right direction. Jeff knew it wouldn't be easy to get everyone fully on board, but the key was persistence. They had to see the value in the shift, not just as something they were doing for the company, but as something that would ultimately make their jobs more rewarding. They would be seen not just as salespeople, but as consultants, experts in a new, rapidly evolving world. As the weeks progressed, Jeff worked closely with his team to provide training and support. They brought in experts from Tesla's corporate offices who led workshops on the company's software, battery technology, and new features in upcoming models. Jeff encouraged his team to experiment, to ask questions, to dig deep into the technology, even if they didn't completely understand it at first. It wasn't just about selling cars. It was about being a part of something bigger, a movement. At the same time, Jeff noticed another shift occurring in the dealership itself. Word of the changes was spreading, and it wasn't just the sales team who was adjusting to the new vision. The service department, once a separate entity, was now fully integrated into the experience. Technicians were engaging with customers more, explaining the finer details of Tesla's engineering, answering questions, and showing customers how their cars worked. There was a sense of pride among the technicians, who were now not just repairing cars, but becoming a part of the customer journey. One afternoon, as Jeff walked through the service area, he overheard a technician, Maria, explaining the new battery tech to a customer. She spoke with the kind of authority that came from understanding the product on a deep level. She wasn't just fixing a problem. She was educating the customer, helping them understand the car's features, and making them feel like part of the Tesla family. Jeff couldn't help but smile. He had envisioned this. He had pushed for it, fought for it, and now it was happening. Later that day, Jeff sat in his office, reviewing some customer feedback forms that had come in over the past few weeks. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. Customers were commenting on the helpfulness of the staff, their knowledge of the product, and the overall experience of working with the dealership. It wasn't just about selling cars. It was about creating a community. As Jeff read through the comments, he realized something important. Change had never been about abandoning the past, but rather about evolving it. He had taken the strengths of the dealership, its commitment to customer service, and combined them with the bold vision that Musk had set forth. Together, they had created something new, something that felt right. The ripple effect from these changes was only beginning, but Jeff could feel it. And he knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The dealership had been buzzing with activity for weeks, but Jeff could feel the calm before the storm. It was something that had been hanging in the air for a while, a nagging sense that all of their hard work was about to face its first major challenge. The dealership had been steadily improving, customer satisfaction was rising, and the sales team had finally started to embrace the new way of doing things. But Jeff knew that a big test was just around the corner, and it wasn't going to be easy. The test came sooner than expected. One Wednesday morning, Jeff received an urgent email from the regional Tesla director, Megan Richards. The subject line simply read, "Urgent. Corporate visit next week. Be ready." "Great," Jeff muttered under his breath. The corporate visit was not just a routine checkup. Tesla's top brass would be in town to assess the dealership's progress and evaluate its adherence to the new company-wide standards. It wasn't just about sales numbers. It was about how well the dealership had integrated Tesla's culture into its day-to-day operations. Megan's email was clear. This would be a high-stakes visit. Jeff immediately called a meeting with his leadership team to discuss the visit and prepare for the inspection. "All right, everyone," Jeff began, standing at the front of the room. "We've got a corporate visit next week. This is our first real test, and it's important we show them how much we've grown since the changes started." The room grew quiet, and Jeff could see the nervous energy in the eyes of his team. They'd done well so far, but this visit would be different. There would be no room for mistakes. They had to show that Tesla's vision was alive and thriving at the dealership. "We've got a lot to prove," Jeff continued. "We need to demonstrate that we're not just selling cars, we're building a community. We need to show them that the changes we've made are real and impactful. It's not just about making numbers, it's about making a difference." Tom, who had been one of the most vocal skeptics during the early days of the transition, raised his hand. "Jeff, I get it. But it's one thing to tell customers what Tesla's all about, but another to demonstrate it to corporate. We're going to have to step up our game even more. What if they don't think we're doing enough? Jeff could sense the anxiety in Tom's voice. He knew the pressure on his team was mounting, but he wasn't about to back down. I understand, Tom, but this is why we've been working so hard. We've already made huge strides. Now, we just need to keep pushing forward. If we stay focused and keep showing the value of what we're doing, we'll be ready. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Jeff and his team worked tirelessly, doing everything they could to make sure the dealership was operating at its absolute best. They rehearsed presentations, fine-tuned their customer engagement strategies, and made sure the cars on the floor were spotless. Jeff even went so far as to personally review the sales scripts with his team, emphasizing the importance of connecting with customers on a deeper level. We're not just talking about cars, Jeff told his team during one of the final prep sessions. We're talking about the future. This is our chance to show that we're part of something bigger. We're part of a movement. If we approach this with that mindset, it'll be impossible for them not to see the value in what we're doing. It was all hands on deck, and the team worked with a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. The pressure was high, but so was their determination. Jeff knew that the next few days would be a turning point for the dealership. The morning of the corporate visit arrived, and the dealership was buzzing with anticipation. Megan Richards arrived first, with a small team of Tesla executives in tow. Jeff greeted her warmly as they exchanged pleasantries before the meeting began. "We're excited to see what you've been doing here, Jeff," Megan said, her eyes scanning the showroom floor. "We've been hearing good things, but today, we get to see it firsthand." Jeff felt a knot form in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. He couldn't let nerves get the best of him. Over the course of the next several hours, the Tesla executives toured the dealership. They observed the sales interactions, asked questions about the technology, and watched as Jeff and his team interacted with customers. Megan was particularly interested in how well the staff understood Tesla's mission and how effectively they communicated it to potential buyers. During one of the tours, Jeff found himself talking to a group of executives about the dealership's new customer experience model. He explained how the team was focusing on educating customers about Tesla's technology, showing them how it was not just about the cars, but about the larger vision of sustainable energy and innovation. He could tell they were impressed, but he knew that actions spoke louder than words. The real test came when the group stopped at one of the delivery areas where a new customer was picking up their Tesla Model Y. The customer, a middle-aged woman named Carol, had been working with Tom for several weeks. She had visited the dealership multiple times, asked countless questions, and had even requested a demonstration of Tesla's autopilot feature. Tom had been patient, answering all her questions and guiding her through the process. Megan approached Carol with a smile. "How's everything going today?" she asked, her voice warm and welcoming. Carol beamed, clearly excited. "I'm so thrilled. I've been wanting to make the switch to electric for years, and Tesla just feels like the right fit for me. Tom has been amazing, answering all my questions. He made sure I understood everything about the car before I made the purchase." Jeff watched as the conversation unfolded, a sense of pride welling up inside him. This was the moment. This was what they had worked so hard to achieve: the connection, the education, the experience. After a few more interactions and observations, Megan called Jeff aside for a private conversation. Her tone was serious, but there was a hint of approval in her eyes. "Jeff, I have to say, I'm impressed," Megan said. "You've made a lot of progress here. The changes you've implemented are noticeable, and the customer experience is much stronger than it was when we last visited. It's clear that you've fully embraced the Tesla culture." Jeff felt a rush of relief. He had been waiting for that moment, the moment when all the hard work, the late nights, and the uncertainty finally paid off. "That means a lot coming from you, Megan," Jeff replied, his voice steady but full of gratitude. "We've worked hard, but we're just getting started. There's still a long way to go." Megan nodded. "I believe it. Keep up the great work. We'll be in touch with the final review soon, but for now, I'm confident that you're on the right track." As Megan and her team left the dealership later that afternoon, Jeff stood in the showroom, reflecting on the day. It had been a test, and they had passed. But Jeff knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, he felt confident that the dealership was on the right path. They had overcome their first major hurdle, and it was a victory that they would carry with them as they continued to move forward. The excitement from the successful corporate visit was still palpable when the next wave of uncertainty hit. Jeff had been walking on air for days, riding the high of knowing they had passed their first major test. Corporate had been impressed, and for the first time, the team felt like they were finally getting somewhere. They had come so far in such a short amount of time, and everything seemed to be going perfectly. But, as is often the case with any business, success is always followed by unexpected hurdles. Jeff received a call on a quiet Friday afternoon that threw everything into chaos. It was from Megan Richards, the regional Tesla director. Her voice was tight, almost strained, as she spoke. "Jeff, I just got off the phone with headquarters. There's a problem," Megan said, her words feeling like a sudden drop in temperature. "It's about your sales numbers for the past quarter. They've come in a lot lower than expected. I know you've made a lot of improvements in customer engagement, but the numbers aren't where they need to be." Jeff felt a lump form in his throat. "Wait, are you saying we're not hitting our targets?" Megan hesitated before responding, clearly weighing her words. "That's exactly it. The overall sales figures are down. There are a lot of factors that go into these numbers, and I understand the changes you've been making take time, but it's starting to raise concerns at the top. We're going to need to see a significant improvement by next month." The conversation ended shortly after that, but Jeff was left in stunned silence. His mind raced as he walked back into his office. He had thought the corporate visit had cemented their success. They had all worked so hard to create a culture that embraced innovation, sustainability, and customer experience. But now, it seemed as though their efforts weren't enough. He called an emergency meeting with his leadership team that afternoon to break the news. "Everyone, we have a serious issue," Jeff began, standing before his team. "We've been informed that our sales numbers are not meeting expectations. We've made incredible strides with customer satisfaction, but the numbers are still lagging. We've got a month to turn this around." The room went silent. Jeff could see the uncertainty in the eyes of his team. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. Tom was the first to speak, his voice tinged with frustration. "I don't get it, Jeff. We've been doing everything right. We've improved the customer experience. We've become more knowledgeable, and people are starting to really get excited about the brand. How are we still not meeting targets?" Jeff took a deep breath. He understood the frustration. It felt like they had made so much progress only to hit a wall. But he also knew that this was just another challenge to overcome. "I know," Jeff said, his voice steady but tinged with the same frustration. "We've done a lot of great things, but sales are a numbers game. We've been focusing on the long-term goals, and that's important. But we also need to find ways to drive sales now. We can't lose sight of both." There was a long pause before Maria, one of the newer salespeople, spoke up. "What if it's not just about the numbers themselves? Maybe it's about the way we're positioning the brand. Are we connecting with the right people? Are we targeting the right market segments?" The question hung in the air. It was a good one. Perhaps they had been so focused on transforming their internal culture and customer experience that they hadn't thought enough about their external marketing and sales strategies. Tesla's target market wasn't just anyone looking for a car. It was a specific type of customer, one who prioritized sustainability, technology, and innovation. "That's a great point, Maria," Jeff said, nodding thoughtfully. "Maybe we need to look at how we're reaching potential customers. Are we doing enough to target the right demographic?" The team brainstormed ideas for the next hour, trying to come up with a strategy that would allow them to increase sales and meet corporate expectations. They discussed everything from targeting younger buyers who were environmentally conscious to offering more personalized sales experiences for those who were already familiar with Tesla's technology. Eventually, Jeff suggested a new initiative, an exclusive Tesla event aimed at educating potential customers not only about the cars but about the larger mission of Tesla. The event would highlight Tesla's impact on the environment, showcase its cutting-edge technology, and allow potential customers to interact with the cars in a more hands-on way. They could partner with local influencers, invite existing Tesla owners to share their experiences, and offer test drives to attendees. "It's a way to showcase everything we're doing," Jeff explained, "and build excitement." We need to make sure we're not just telling people why Tesla is different. We need to show them, give them an experience that's memorable. The team was on board with the idea, and they began organizing the event right away. But even as the plans took shape, Jeff couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were still not addressing the core issue. They had to increase sales quickly, but there was so much more to the problem than just putting on a flashy event. He had been so focused on building a culture of excellence that he had failed to keep his finger on the pulse of immediate sales goals. The challenge was balancing long-term brand building with short-term results. The event was scheduled for the following weekend, and the entire team rallied around it. They pulled out all the stops, contacting local media, arranging for Tesla experts to give in-depth presentations on the technology, and setting up demo stations where attendees could experience Tesla's features up close. As the event approached, Jeff began to wonder whether he was doing the right thing. What if the event wasn't enough? What if they were still missing something fundamental? The night before the event, Jeff sat in his office, staring at the Tesla models on the showroom floor. The glossy exteriors, the sleek lines, the promise of a sustainable future. It was all there. But somehow, it didn't feel like enough. The numbers had to come through. The pressure was mounting, and with it, Jeff's uncertainty. The next day, the event unfolded with a mix of excitement and tension. Customers poured in, eager to learn more about Tesla's cars, but Jeff couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. His mind kept drifting back to the sales figures. Could this event make a real difference? Could it truly turn things around? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The Tesla event was an all-out spectacle. The dealership was flooded with people, curious buyers, Tesla enthusiasts, and even those who had heard about the event through the local media buzz. Jeff watched the crowd with mixed feelings. There was excitement, yes, but there was also an underlying sense of urgency that gnawed at him. He knew this event was the make-or-break moment. This was their chance to turn things around, but it had to be more than just a show. It had to generate real interest, real sales. Jeff, you need to see this. Maria called out to him from the corner of the showroom. She was talking to a young couple who had been particularly interested in the Model 3. Jeff made his way over, trying to mask the anxiety creeping into his chest. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone steady but tight. Maria gave him an excited look. "They're asking about financing options. And they're looking at the Model 3 like it's the car they want. I think we've got a real shot here." Jeff's heart raced. "That's great. Let's make sure we give them all the info they need. I'll talk to them about the benefits of Tesla's tech. But you're right, we need to move quickly if we're going to convert this." As Jeff spoke with the couple, explaining the benefits of Tesla's autopilot system, its advanced energy efficiency, and the overall driving experience, he could see that they were genuinely interested. They had done their research, and it seemed that all that was left was answering a few lingering questions before they made their decision. The couple signed the papers shortly after. Maria was ecstatic. One sale down. But Jeff knew one sale wouldn't be enough. They needed more. Much more. The day stretched on, and the dealership remained packed with potential customers. The atmosphere was electric. People were eager, and many had questions about the cars, the technology, and even Tesla's future plans. Jeff watched as his team worked their magic, taking customers on test drives, answering questions, and demonstrating the unique aspects of Tesla ownership. Yet, despite the buzz, the sales weren't where they needed to be. The event had created interest, but it hadn't generated the volume of conversions they had hoped for. It wasn't enough to overcome the sales gap that had been left by the previous quarter's underperformance. By late afternoon, Jeff found himself alone in the showroom, staring out the glass walls into the parking lot. The crowd was beginning to thin out, and he couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. They had worked so hard to put this event together. So much energy had gone into making sure it was a success, and yet here they were, on the edge of another failure. "Jeff." He turned to see Tom approaching, his expression somber but not defeated. "We've done everything we could today. There's no point in stressing about what we can't control," Tom said, his voice surprisingly calm. Jeff sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I know, Tom. I thought this event would make the difference. We needed a home run, and now I'm not sure we've even got a single." Tom nodded. "I get it. But here's the thing. We've had some wins today, even if they're not the kind we expected. You've got people talking about Tesla. You've got people excited about the brand. That's something. Jeff considered Tom's words. It was true. There had been a lot of good moments that day. Many people seemed genuinely excited about Tesla, and the level of engagement was higher than they had seen before. But it didn't change the fact that the immediate numbers were still lacking. Maybe we need to rethink our approach, Jeff said, his voice softening as he looked at Tom. What if we've been going about this all wrong? Maybe the answer isn't in trying to push sales so hard. Maybe it's about building that genuine connection with people, showing them that this isn't just a car, it's a lifestyle. Tom raised an eyebrow. A lifestyle? Yeah. Tesla's not just about selling a product. It's about offering something bigger. It's about sustainability, innovation, and being part of something that's changing the world. Maybe we've been so focused on the sales pitch that we haven't been focused enough on selling the bigger picture. Tom thought for a moment. So you think if we focus more on the vision behind the product, the sales will follow? Jeff nodded slowly. Exactly. We need to make sure people understand what Tesla represents, not just as a company, but as a movement. We're not just selling a car. We're selling a vision for the future. At that moment, Jeff knew that their approach needed to change. They couldn't keep chasing after immediate numbers with flashy events or high-pressure sales tactics. Instead, they had to nurture the relationships they were building with their customers. They had to show people that buying a Tesla wasn't just a transaction. It was a way to join a community that was helping to shape the future of the planet. The next few weeks were a turning point for the dealership. Jeff and his team took a step back to reevaluate their strategy. They focused less on traditional sales goals and more on building meaningful connections with customers. They hosted smaller, more intimate events that highlighted the unique aspects of Tesla ownership, things like charging infrastructure, sustainability efforts, and how Tesla cars could enhance the daily lives of owners. They also introduced a referral program that incentivized existing Tesla owners to bring in friends and family, allowing them to share their experiences and build a stronger community around the brand. And slowly but surely, the sales started to pick up. It wasn't immediate, but the change was noticeable. Customers weren't just coming in for the cars. They were coming in because they wanted to be part of something bigger. They wanted to be part of the movement Tesla had been championing for years. One afternoon, as Jeff was walking through the dealership, he saw a familiar face in the crowd, Megan Richards. She was standing by the reception desk, speaking with one of the salespeople. Jeff's heart skipped a beat, and he walked over to her. "Hey, Megan, what brings you by?" Jeff asked, his voice a bit apprehensive. Megan turned with a smile. "I came to see for myself how things are going. I've been hearing good things." "Well," Jeff said, offering a small but confident smile, "I think we're on the right track now." Megan's eyes glinted with approval. "I can see that. There's been a real shift here, Jeff. The customer experience is stronger than ever, and I'm hearing great things from the people who've come in." Jeff's chest swelled with pride. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The turning point had arrived. But he knew that the journey wasn't over. They had overcome one obstacle, but there were still more challenges to face. And now, with this new approach, he felt ready to face them. The weeks following the change in strategy felt like a breath of fresh air. There was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere at the dealership. The pressure had begun to ease as Jeff and his team focused less on hitting immediate sales quotas and more on creating lasting connections with their customers. It was as if they were no longer in a race to close deals. Instead, they were engaged in a deeper conversation with people who were interested in what Tesla was truly about. Sales began to slowly but steadily climb. It wasn't the dramatic overnight change Jeff had hoped for, but it was progress. And in this business, progress was all that mattered. Maria, who had been one of the strongest advocates for the new approach, was the first to bring in a big sale after the shift. A young couple in their late 20s had come into the showroom, initially just curious. They didn't expect to be buying a car that day. But after hearing about Tesla's vision and the company's impact on the environment, they couldn't help but get excited about the future. "Maria, you've been talking to them for over an hour. What's going on?" Jeff asked as he watched her walking out of the office, a smile tugging at her lips. "They're in," she said, her voice almost in disbelief. "They're going with the Model Y, and they're excited about it. I think what really got them was the idea of being part of something that goes beyond just owning a car. They love that Tesla isn't just a product, it's a movement. Jeff couldn't help but grin. That's the kind of connection we've been aiming for. Maria's face brightened. I'm so glad we're doing this. I think we're on the right track, Jeff. It's not just about pushing the cars anymore. We're showing people why Tesla matters. Jeff nodded in agreement. He was starting to believe that they had cracked the code. The excitement surrounding Tesla wasn't just about the cars. It was about the impact the company was having on the world. More and more customers were beginning to realize that by choosing a Tesla, they weren't just buying a vehicle. They were supporting a revolution. A week later, Jeff got another surprising call from Megan Richards. Jeff, I've been keeping an eye on the numbers. I know it's been a slow process, but I'm seeing a significant uptick in both sales and engagement from your store. Keep doing what you're doing. For the first time in a while, Jeff allowed himself to breathe easier. He was starting to believe that they might be on the cusp of a real turnaround. And then, just as he was about to hang up, Megan added, by the way, we've got a visit scheduled from Elon Musk himself in 2 weeks. Headquarters is making a tour of several dealerships, and yours is one of the stops. Jeff's pulse quickened at the mention of Elon Musk. He had met corporate executives before and even attended high-profile meetings. But the idea of meeting the man who had built Tesla from the ground up left him feeling both excited and nervous. It was an opportunity to prove themselves on a grand stage, to show that they had the vision, the passion, and the results to back up the bigger picture they had been working towards. Elon Musk was more than just a business leader. He was a legend. His reputation for innovation and bold thinking had transformed not just the electric vehicle industry but entire sectors of technology, space travel, and energy. For Jeff, this was a moment of immense significance. This was the moment where he would show the world, well, at least the Tesla world, that they were a dealership worthy of being a part of the Tesla legacy. Over the next few days, Jeff and his team prepared for the visit. They cleaned up the showroom, polished every car, and meticulously organized the event. It was as if every detail had to be perfect. The pressure to impress Elon was more than they had ever experienced before. When the day finally arrived, the air in the dealership was thick with anticipation. The employees were buzzing with energy, even though they were all aware of the high stakes. This wasn't just any visit. It was the visit that could define their future with Tesla. Elon Musk arrived right on time, stepping out of a sleek Tesla Model S. He was exactly how everyone imagined him. Confident, focused, but with an air of curiosity that seemed to keep him always on the move, always thinking. As he walked toward the showroom, the energy in the room shifted. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath. Jeff met him at the door, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Mr. Musk, it's an honor to have you here, Jeff said, extending his hand. I'm Jeff, the manager here. We've been working really hard to represent the Tesla brand the way it deserves. Elon smiled slightly, but there was an intensity in his eyes that kept Jeff on edge. I've heard good things about you. Let's take a look. For the next hour, Elon toured the dealership, asking questions, observing the cars, and talking with customers and staff. Jeff watched, doing his best to remain composed as the legend himself examined every detail of the operation. He was so immersed in the process, however, that he barely noticed when Elon stopped in front of a Model 3 in the corner of the showroom. This one's a beauty, Elon remarked. The Model 3 is one of our biggest game changers. It's affordable, efficient, and has all the technology Tesla is known for. Jeff nodded, his pride swelling. We've seen a lot of interest in the Model 3 here. It's been one of our top sellers, especially with younger buyers who are looking for that combination of affordability and sustainability. Elon tilted his head slightly. I'm glad to hear it. It's nice to see that people are starting to see Tesla for more than just a luxury brand. We need more people to understand that we're not just about selling cars. We're about changing the world. The conversation flowed seamlessly, and it became clear to Jeff that Elon wasn't interested in the traditional corporate speech. He didn't want to hear about metrics and data points. He wanted to hear about the bigger picture, how the team was connecting with customers, how they were living the values of Tesla, and how they were spreading the company's mission. As the visit came to an end, Jeff felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The encounter had been more than he had ever expected. Elon's feedback was positive, but it wasn't the usual corporate pat on the back. It was more personal, more visionary. Elon wanted to know if they were ready to be a part of something greater, if they were ready to push the envelope and make a lasting impact. As Elon was about to leave, he turned back to Jeff. "You're doing well here. Keep it up. I'll be watching," he said, before getting back into his car and driving away. The room was silent for a moment before Maria burst out. "Did he just say he'd be watching us? Like, he's keeping an eye on us?" Jeff laughed, still in shock. "I think so." But in that moment, Jeff realized something profound. The visit wasn't just about impressing Elon Musk. It was about validating everything they had been working toward. They had been pushing to represent Tesla's mission, not just the products. And now, it seemed like they were finally being seen. The week after Elon Musk's visit felt like a whirlwind. The dealership had been buzzing with excitement, and there was a palpable shift in the air. Jeff couldn't help but smile whenever he thought about that moment when Elon had complimented their efforts. It wasn't just the validation he was after. It was the understanding that they were no longer just another dealership. They were part of a bigger story, a movement that was changing the world, one car at a time. But as the dust settled, Jeff realized something crucial. It wasn't enough to simply bask in the glow of a visit from a tech icon. They had to sustain the momentum. The future of the dealership depended on continuing the changes they had started. It wasn't just about making sales. It was about embracing the Tesla mission every single day, in every interaction with customers. That morning, Jeff called a meeting with his team. "We're doing great," Jeff began, standing at the front of the room, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "But the truth is, we've only just scratched the surface. Elon came to see how we're doing, and he's happy with the direction we're going. But we can't stop now. We need to keep pushing, keep evolving, and keep changing lives." The room was filled with nods of agreement, but Jeff could see a bit of uncertainty in their eyes. It wasn't that they weren't on board with the mission. It was that they didn't quite know what the next step should be. Maria, always the optimist, raised her hand. "So, what's next, Jeff? We've made a great start with our events and connecting with customers. But I feel like there's more we could be doing. More ways to reach people." Jeff took a deep breath. He had been thinking about this for days now. They had accomplished a lot, but to make a lasting impact, they needed to think bigger. The dealership had to become more than just a place to buy a car. It needed to become a hub for the community, a space where people could come together and learn about Tesla's innovations, sustainability efforts, and the future of transportation. "I think we need to start thinking about how we can integrate more into the local community," Jeff said, pacing slowly as he spoke. "What if we held educational workshops on electric vehicles and sustainability? What if we hosted local events to show people that Tesla is a part of the future, not just an option for the rich?" Tom, the quiet but thoughtful member of the team, spoke up. "I like that idea. People are still skeptical about electric vehicles. If we show them how Tesla is part of a larger shift in the way we live, we can convince them that it's not just a car, it's a lifestyle." "Exactly," Jeff replied, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "We can partner with local organizations, environmental groups, or even schools to host events that focus on clean energy, climate change, and the importance of sustainability. We can invite industry experts and Tesla engineers and give people a chance to interact with our cars in a new way." Maria, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm, jumped in. "What if we hosted a Tesla Experience Day? People can take test drives, yes, but also see how the cars fit into real-world scenarios. We could have presentations on how solar energy works in tandem with the cars, or have someone talk about how Tesla is reshaping transportation globally." Jeff smiled at the suggestions. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. We're not just selling cars, we're selling the future. And people need to understand that." The team spent the rest of the meeting brainstorming ideas for the Tesla Experience Day, refining the vision of their dealership as a community center that went beyond just the business of selling vehicles. It was about building relationships, educating the public, and being part of a cultural shift. Over the next few weeks, they put the plan into action. They partnered with local environmental groups and hosted workshops on sustainability, offering everything from presentations on the benefits of electric vehicles to discussions about the impact of fossil fuels on the environment. They invited Tesla engineers to speak about the technology behind the cars, and they worked hard to get the local community involved. The Tesla Experience Day quickly became the talk of the town. People came in droves to learn more about the brand, take test drives, and understand the broader impact of the Tesla movement. It wasn't just about the cars anymore. It was about education, awareness, and participation in something larger than themselves. On the day of the event, the dealership was packed. There were families, tech enthusiasts, environmental advocates, and even local politicians. The atmosphere was electric, and Jeff felt a rush of pride as he watched the crowds interact with his team. The focus wasn't solely on making sales. It was on educating, connecting, and inspiring people to think about the future in a new way. As the day progressed, Jeff noticed something incredible happening. People who had come in only half interested in Tesla's cars were leaving with new ideas and a sense of purpose. The cars were no longer just about luxury. They were symbols of a movement that had the potential to change the world. By the end of the day, the dealership had received more interest and sign-ups than they had in the previous month. Sales were up, but more importantly, the entire team felt a sense of accomplishment. They weren't just selling cars anymore. They were part of something bigger, a force for change that was rooted in sustainability, innovation, and the future. That night, Jeff stayed at the dealership late, reflecting on the day's events. As the lights flickered off in the showroom, he stood alone in the quiet space, thinking about how far they had come. They had started with a struggling dealership, a lack of direction, and uncertainty about the future. But now, with their community-centered approach, they were building something much more profound. It wasn't just about selling Tesla cars. It was about creating a legacy, about shaping the future of transportation, and helping people see that electric vehicles weren't just a fad, they were the future. And then it hit him. Elon Musk had said it himself. Tesla wasn't just about the cars. It was about the mission. The mission to create sustainable energy solutions that could power the world. And with that, Jeff realized that they were no longer just working in a dealership. They were part of something far bigger than themselves, and that made all the difference. As the weeks turned into months, the Tesla dealership's reputation began to spread beyond just the local community. Word of mouth was becoming their most powerful tool. Customers who had visited the Tesla Experience Day were now returning with friends and family. The excitement surrounding the brand was infectious, and with every passing day, Jeff could see the results of their hard work. Maria had become a local celebrity of sorts. Her passion for Tesla's mission and her ability to connect with people were undeniable. Customers weren't just buying cars from her. They were buying into a vision. Her social media following had grown exponentially as well, as more people wanted to hear her take on the future of transportation and sustainability. One afternoon, Jeff walked into the showroom to find Maria surrounded by a group of potential buyers. She was speaking with such enthusiasm, telling them about the long-term benefits of owning a Tesla and how the technology behind the car was only getting better with each update. She had that natural gift for making people feel like they were part of something larger. Jeff couldn't help but smile as he watched her in action. But despite the progress, there was still an underlying tension. Jeff had seen it in his team, even in Maria. As successful as they were becoming, the pressure to keep delivering the numbers was always there. The corporate expectations from Tesla headquarters had not eased up. In fact, they were growing. Megan Richards had made it clear that she expected consistent growth month after month. And while the dealership was performing well, the sense of urgency never seemed to fade. That tension came to a head one Thursday morning. Jeff had just finished a meeting with his team, and they were celebrating another record-breaking month when he received an unexpected phone call from Megan. "Jeff," Megan began, her voice calm but stern, "I need to have a serious conversation with you. We've been reviewing the results from your dealership, and while the numbers are improving, we're seeing something concerning." Jeff's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the growth they had experienced hadn't been a fluke, but the pressure from corporate was unrelenting. "What's the issue?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's about the long-term strategy. Your dealership's performance is great for the short term, but we're not seeing the kind of growth that we expect from a Tesla dealership in this market. The competition is fierce, and we need to know that your team is prepared to handle the next phase of expansion." Jeff's mind raced. They had been working so hard to change the dynamic at the dealership. They had made significant strides in improving sales and customer satisfaction, yet it seemed like it wasn't enough. "I understand the concern, Megan," Jeff replied, his voice tight with frustration. But I believe we're on the right track. We're building real relationships with customers, and we're not just selling cars, we're educating people about the Tesla mission. It's a longer game. Megan's tone softened slightly, but the pressure was still there. I get that. But you need to understand that this isn't just about building relationships. Tesla is a brand that is changing the world. It's bigger than just one dealership. We need you to scale up, and we need it fast. I hear you, Jeff said, his mind still reeling. We're pushing forward as quickly as we can, but I think there's a balance between growth and sustainability. We don't want to sacrifice quality for speed. Megan paused before responding, her voice more measured. I agree, but I need you to know that corporate has big plans for the area. The next few months are crucial. We expect a significant spike in demand, and I need to know you can handle it. If you can't, we may have to make some difficult decisions. The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jeff took a deep breath, feeling the pressure mounting. We'll make it happen, he said, his voice firm despite the fear creeping in. We've got this. After the call ended, Jeff sat back in his chair, the reality of the situation sinking in. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at a crossroads. On one hand, they had made great strides in creating a culture of authenticity and customer connection. On the other, the relentless pressure to scale quickly threatened to unravel everything they had worked for. He knew he had to act fast. If they were going to meet corporate expectations and continue the momentum they had built, it would take more than just effort. It would take strategy, planning, and a solid team. He had no illusions about the difficulty ahead, but he also knew that they couldn't afford to slow down. Later that day, Jeff called another meeting with his team. All right, everyone, Jeff began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the situation. We've done incredible work, but we've got a challenge ahead of us. Corporate expects rapid growth. They want us to scale quickly, and if we're going to meet those expectations, we need to level up. The team was quiet, all eyes on Jeff as he spoke. They had all felt the pressure building, but hearing it from Jeff brought a new sense of gravity to the situation. We've been doing well, Jeff continued, but we need to find a way to amplify our efforts. This isn't just about selling more cars. It's about creating an infrastructure that can handle the future. We're going to need to streamline our processes, bring in more people, and start thinking bigger and fast. Maria spoke up first. We can do it, Jeff, but we need to stay true to the principles we've been working with. We've built something special here. Let's not lose that in the rush to grow. Jeff smiled at her, grateful for her unwavering commitment. Exactly. We can grow, but we have to make sure we don't lose the heart of what we've created. Tom, ever the strategist, added, we'll need to look into expanding our staff and improving our training processes. And we'll need to be more efficient with our sales funnel. If we're going to scale, we can't keep doing things the same way. We need to optimize. Jeff nodded. I agree. We'll take this one step at a time, but we need to move fast. Let's get to work. The team left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. The challenge ahead was daunting, but they were ready. They had built something meaningful, and now it was time to take it to the next level. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Jeff and his team scrambled to meet corporate's ambitious goals. New hires were brought on board, existing processes were streamlined, and every member of the team worked overtime to ensure that they could handle the incoming demand. The dealership, once a small local hub, was quickly transforming into a well-oiled machine designed for rapid growth. Despite their best efforts, the pressure was beginning to take a toll on everyone. The once tightly knit group that had worked so harmoniously was now showing signs of strain. Maria, who had always been the heart of the team, seemed distant, her usual spark dimming as she navigated the growing demands of her role. Tom, the ever-persistent problem solver, was juggling an endless series of tasks and couldn't keep up with the pace. And Jeff was exhausted. He had always prided himself on his ability to lead with a steady hand, but now, the weight of corporate expectations and the constant pressure to scale quickly was beginning to wear on him. He found himself losing sleep, lying awake at night wondering if they could really pull it off. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Jeff sat alone in his office, staring at the numbers on his computer screen. The sales were up, but so were the costs. Expanding had brought in more revenue, but it was also stretching them thin. Hiring new staff, implementing new systems, and launching more aggressive marketing campaigns meant higher operational costs, and the margins were growing thinner. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were losing something important in the process. The authenticity, the personal touch that had set them apart from other dealerships, it was starting to fade in the rush to grow. Jeff leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He had worked so hard to create a dealership that wasn't just about the cars, but about building a community. A place where people could come and feel a connection, not just with the brand, but with the values Tesla represented. But now, in the hustle to meet corporate's targets, he feared that he was losing sight of that original vision. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Jeff looked up to see Maria standing in the doorway. Her face, usually full of energy, was tired, and her eyes were filled with concern. "Hey," Maria said softly, "got a minute?" "Of course," Jeff replied, motioning for her to come in. "What's up?" Maria stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She leaned against the desk, crossing her arms as she stared at the floor for a moment, collecting her thoughts. I'm starting to feel like we're losing control," Maria said finally, her voice quiet but heavy with emotion. "We're growing, and that's great, but I don't think we're growing in the right way. We're so focused on the numbers, on scaling up, that we're forgetting why we started all of this in the first place." Jeff didn't answer immediately, but he couldn't agree more. He had been so fixated on meeting corporate's expectations that he hadn't given himself the time to reflect on the long-term consequences. The dealership had gone from being a place of innovation and connection to just another business trying to hit quotas. "I get what you're saying," Jeff finally replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I'm feeling it too. But what choice do we have? Corporate's pushing us, and if we don't deliver, they could pull the rug out from under us." Maria sighed, sitting down across from him. "I know. I get that. But we're all starting to feel like we're just cogs in a machine. We're running faster and faster, and the more we accomplish, the further away we get from the core of what we're doing here. People come to us because we're different, because we care. And I'm worried we're losing that." Jeff stared at her, his mind racing. She was right. They had built something special, something that transcended just selling cars. It was about being part of a bigger movement, about changing the world, one car at a time. But in their rush to meet corporate's demands, they were losing sight of that vision. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Maria continued, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm not talking about leaving, but I'm starting to feel like we're sacrificing something really important here. And I don't know if I can keep going if it means losing the heart of what we've created." Jeff felt a lump form in his throat. He had never seen Maria like this before. She had always been the one who rallied the team, the one who inspired everyone to push forward. But now, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the same exhaustion he had been feeling. The pressure was starting to take its toll on everyone, and Jeff knew something had to change. "We can't lose what made us special," Jeff said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not going to let that happen. I've been so focused on corporate's demands that I forgot why we're really doing this. We need to find a way to grow without losing ourselves in the process." Maria smiled faintly, the weight of her concerns lifting just slightly. "I'm glad to hear you say that. I think we need to make a choice, Jeff. We can keep chasing corporate's numbers, keep scaling up until we burn out. Or we can choose to build something sustainable, something that matters, and that's true to the values we started with." Jeff's heart raced as he thought about the future. The choice seemed clear, but it was one that would require a lot of courage. They couldn't continue on the path they were heading. It wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't fulfilling. "We're at a crossroads," Jeff said, standing up. "We need to take a step back, reassess, and figure out what kind of business we really want to be. If that means slowing down for a bit, then so be it." Maria nodded. "It's not going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do. We've built something great, and we can't let it fall apart just to chase a number." Jeff looked at her, his mind made up. It was time to make a bold choice. He wasn't going to let the pressures of the corporate world dictate their future. He wasn't going to lose the soul of the dealership. "It's time to take control of our own future," Jeff said, "and we'll do it our way." The next morning, Jeff sat quietly in his office, staring at the calendar on his desk. It was packed with meetings, calls, and deadlines, a stark reminder of the never-ending demands of corporate. Yet, as he sat there, a growing sense of clarity began to wash over him. He realized something he hadn't fully grasped until now. He needed to take control of the dealership's destiny. No one else could do it for him. That evening, after a long day of meetings and strategizing with his team, Jeff called a company-wide gathering. He knew the team needed to hear from him, especially after Maria's heartfelt words earlier. It was time to face the reality that their growth had come at a cost, and that they needed to reevaluate their direction. As the team gathered in the conference room, the energy was a mix of anticipation and exhaustion. The pressure had been building for weeks, and Jeff could feel the weight of the situation on all of their shoulders. He stood at the front of the room, taking a deep breath before he began to speak. "Everyone," he started, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I want to thank you all for everything you've done. I know these last few months have been tough. The growth we've seen has been amazing, but it's also come with its own set of challenges. We've been pushing hard to meet corporate's expectations, and in doing so, we've started to lose sight of why we got into this business in the first place." The room fell silent. Jeff could see the recognition in their eyes. They knew what he was talking about. They had all felt it. "We built this dealership to be more than just a place to buy cars," Jeff continued. "We wanted to create a space where people could connect with something bigger. We wanted to be a part of a movement, one that's about sustainability, innovation, and making a difference in the world. But in chasing numbers and hitting quotas, we've let that vision slip away." He paused, letting the words sink in. He could see the understanding, even the relief, in the faces of his team. They hadn't been alone in feeling the weight of the situation. "I don't want to sacrifice the heart of what we've built," Jeff said, his voice growing stronger. "We've created something truly special here. A culture, a community. And we're not going to lose that. But we need to make a choice. We need to decide what kind of dealership we want to be moving forward." The room was still. For a moment, it felt as if everyone was holding their breath. Then Maria spoke up, her voice firm and full of conviction. "Jeff's right," she said, standing up. "We've been caught in the rush to scale, but we can't forget why we're here. We can still grow, but we have to do it in a way that stays true to our mission. I think we all want that, don't we?" A murmur of agreement swept through the room, and Jeff saw the team's shoulders relax. It wasn't going to be easy, but they were ready to make the tough decision. Jeff nodded. "Exactly. This is about finding balance. We'll still work with corporate, but we're going to do it on our own terms. We're not going to sacrifice our values for the sake of growth." Tom, who had been quiet until now, spoke up from the back of the room. "So, what's the plan, Jeff? How do we make this happen?" Jeff looked around at his team, his eyes meeting each of theirs. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The moment they took control of their destiny. "We're going to refocus on what made us successful in the first place," Jeff said, his voice resolute. "We'll scale, yes, but we're going to do it thoughtfully. We're going to invest in building strong relationships with our customers, and we'll find ways to expand without compromising on the experience we provide. We're going to work closely with corporate, but we'll be strategic in how we grow. We won't rush it." The room was filled with nods of agreement. The team could feel the shift in the air. This was no longer about chasing numbers. It was about building something sustainable and meaningful. "We're also going to strengthen our team," Jeff continued. "We've already brought in some new people, but we need to invest in training and development. We can't grow if we're not all growing together." Maria smiled. "And we need to focus on innovation. Tesla is about changing the world, and that's what we're here to do. We'll use our platform to make an impact, not just sell cars." The room erupted into applause, the energy in the room shifting from tension to excitement. The weight that had been hanging over everyone seemed to lift in that moment. For the first time in weeks, they all felt like they were on the same page, ready to take on whatever came next. That night, Jeff stayed late at the dealership, working on a new plan, one that aligned with their vision. He started to make the calls, reach out to the corporate team, and arrange a meeting with Megan Richards. It was time to be upfront and honest about the direction they wanted to take. The next morning, Jeff stood in front of his team once more. "We've made our decision," he said with a grin, "and now, we're going to make it happen. Let's show the world that we can grow without losing what makes us unique. Let's take control of our future." The room erupted into cheers. It was a turning point, a moment of clarity and determination. They had made a choice, and they were going to follow through. Over the next few days, Jeff met with Megan Richards and presented their new approach. It wasn't going to be an easy conversation, but Jeff was clear. They would continue to collaborate with corporate, but they would do so on their own terms. Tesla needed to understand that they were building something more than just a dealership. They were creating a community. Megan listened carefully, her expression unreadable, but by the end of the meeting, she gave a nod of approval. "I see where you're coming from, Jeff," she said. "This will take time, but I think it's worth exploring. You have my support." With that, a new chapter began for Jeff and his team. They were no longer just chasing numbers or trying to please corporate. They were reclaiming their vision and moving forward on their own terms. As Jeff left the meeting, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. They were going to do it their way. The weeks that followed the meeting with Megan Richards were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Jeff and his team dove headfirst into planning the future of the dealership, determined to not only meet the corporate expectations but also stay true to their core values. The hard decision they had made was now transforming into action. They had laid down the foundation for something new, something that would serve as both a testament to their commitment and a challenge for them to rise to. Maria was the first to take charge of the new initiative, rallying the team around their shared vision. They needed to start reimagining their dealership as more than just a place to purchase electric vehicles. It had to become a community center for sustainability, innovation, and change. "First things first," Maria said one morning in the conference room, her voice energized. "We need to redefine what we stand for. Our customers don't just want to buy cars. They want to be part of something. We've got to make them feel like they're joining a movement, not just driving off with a new vehicle." Jeff stood by the window, watching the sunlight pour in. He could feel the excitement bubbling up within him as Maria spoke. This was exactly the kind of energy they needed. They had spent so much time focusing on numbers and targets that they had forgotten the power of connection and purpose. "We're going to focus on building an experience," Jeff said, turning to face his team. "One that's about education and community. We'll host events, workshops, and talks about sustainability, renewable energy, and electric vehicles. Our customers will come to us not just to buy cars, but to learn and be a part of something bigger." The team nodded, energized by the plan. They had always believed in Tesla's mission, and now they were going to show others how they could make a difference too. For the next few weeks, the team worked tirelessly to implement their new strategy. They reached out to local environmental organizations, schools, and other community leaders to offer workshops and educational sessions. They also began planning for more sustainable dealership practices, including making sure that the dealership was as eco-friendly as the cars they sold. They also started creating a new marketing campaign that would reflect the dealership's transformation. Gone were the days of flashy billboards and impersonal sales tactics. Instead, they would focus on telling stories about the impact of electric vehicles and the importance of renewable energy. They even created a new slogan, "Driving the Future Together." Tom, who had always been their digital marketing guru, took charge of this campaign. "We need to make sure that we're not just pushing cars, we're sharing stories," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We're going to build a brand that people can believe in, one that's rooted in real values. And we'll make sure that everyone knows they're part of something important when they drive off the lot." As the dealership began to take on a new identity, the results were evident. Customers came in asking about the new workshops and events. They were excited about the educational aspect of the dealership, and many even stayed for the events, engaging with their staff and learning more about sustainability. The space that once felt like a traditional car dealership was now buzzing with a sense of community. One evening, as Jeff walked through the dealership, he couldn't help but smile. The showroom was filled with people, some of them discussing the benefits of electric vehicles, others attending a seminar on renewable energy. The vibe was completely different than it had been just a month ago. They were no longer just selling cars. They were building a space for learning, growth, and change. "Look at this," Jeff said to Maria, who was standing nearby. "It's happening." Maria smiled back, her eyes reflecting the same sense of pride. I told you this would work. People want to be part of something bigger. They don't just want to buy a car. They want to make a difference. But even as they celebrated their success, Jeff knew there was still much work to be done. The dealership had made strides, but the future was uncertain. Corporate still wanted results. There was no guarantee that Tesla's higher-ups would fully support their new direction. Later that week, Jeff received a call from Megan Richards. The tone of her voice was professional, but there was an edge to it. "Jeff," she said, "I've been following your progress, and I'm impressed with what you've done so far. But you need to understand something. Corporate's expectations haven't changed. They're looking for the numbers. They want growth. I understand that you want to make an impact, but we're still going to need to hit certain milestones in order to stay competitive." Jeff took a deep breath. He had known this conversation was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. The pressure to balance their values with the demands of corporate was starting to mount again. "I understand, Megan," Jeff replied, his voice calm but firm. "We're committed to growth, but we're going to do it in a way that aligns with who we are. I'm confident that we can deliver on both fronts. We're not abandoning our mission. We're just making sure that we're growing sustainably." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Jeff could almost hear Megan's thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "All right, Jeff. I'll support you, on one condition. We need to see the numbers. I'll be expecting a full report on your progress in the next few weeks. Make sure that you're not just talking about change, you need to show results." Jeff nodded, even though Megan couldn't see him. "You'll have it, Megan. I'll make sure of it." The call ended, and Jeff set the phone down. He knew they couldn't afford to lose momentum. The dealership was in the middle of a transformation, but corporate still wanted results, and they wanted them fast. He gathered his team together the next morning, his resolve clear. "All right, everyone. We've made amazing progress, but we're not done yet. We've got to show corporate that this new direction is working. We're going to continue with our community-building efforts, but we'll also be focusing on some measurable goals. We'll track our growth, our customer satisfaction, and our sales numbers. We'll make sure that we're meeting corporate's expectations while staying true to our mission." The team nodded, their faces determined. They were in this together, and they weren't about to let anything derail the work they'd started. As Jeff looked around the room, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he knew they had the right foundation. They weren't just a dealership, they were a movement, and together, they would drive it forward. As the days turned into weeks, Jeff found himself at a crossroads. The dealership was thriving, the community was engaged, and the workshops and events had been a huge success. They were building the kind of experience that had initially driven them to work for Tesla in the first place, a space for innovation, sustainability, and education. The customers who walked through the doors were no longer just buyers. They were part of a larger movement. However, the pressure to maintain rapid growth was becoming overwhelming. Corporate's expectations, as conveyed by Megan, loomed large. Every week, there was a new report to file, a new target to meet, a new deadline to hit. Despite the positive response from the community, Jeff knew that corporate was still looking at hard numbers. And no matter how much they believed in their mission, there were financial targets that could not be ignored. As Jeff sat in his office late one night, reviewing sales figures and customer satisfaction reports, his mind kept returning to the same question. Could they truly balance their commitment to sustainability and community with the corporate pressure to scale rapidly? He'd seen firsthand how corporate had pulled strings in the past to drive numbers, often at the expense of the core values of the dealership. He didn't want to go down that path again, but the reality of business was that growth mattered, especially when it came to the bottom line. It was a typical Thursday morning when the next challenge arrived. Jeff was in a meeting with Maria and Tom, reviewing their latest campaign results, when the door to the conference room swung open. Megan Richards stood in the doorway, her face serious. "Jeff, we need to talk," Megan said. Stepping into the room, Maria and Tom exchanged a glance, and Jeff immediately stood up, feeling the weight of the conversation to come. He had known this day would arrive. Corporate had been quiet for too long. "Megan, what's going on?" Jeff asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've been reviewing the latest reports," Megan said, her tone matter-of-fact. "While I commend you on the community work you've been doing, the numbers aren't where we need them to be. I've spoken with the higher-ups, and they're concerned. They want to see more sales, more growth. Fast. Jeff felt a knot form in his stomach. He had prepared for this moment, but it didn't make it any easier. He glanced over at Maria and Tom, who were both looking at him, waiting for a response. More sales? Jeff asked, trying to keep his frustration in check. We've been focusing on long-term growth, creating an experience for customers, building relationships. This isn't just about sales. It's about sustainability, education, and making a real impact. I thought we agreed that the mission mattered as much as the numbers. I understand that, Megan said, her voice softer now. And I'm not saying you should abandon your mission. But the reality is, if we don't show measurable growth in the next quarter, corporate will want to make some serious changes. This is a business, Jeff. We need results. The silence in the room was palpable. Jeff could feel the tension rising, but he wasn't about to give in. He had fought too hard to get to this point. Megan, I've been clear from the start, Jeff said, his voice steady but resolute. We're not sacrificing our values. We're not going to compromise on the experience we're offering our customers just to hit a number. I get it. Growth is important, but it's got to come with purpose. We can't just sell cars to sell cars. That's not why we're here. Megan crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. I understand your position, Jeff, but if the numbers don't change, you might not have a position much longer. I'm telling you this because I believe in what you're doing, but you need to start balancing the mission with results. Otherwise, I can't guarantee your future with Tesla. The room felt colder in that moment. Jeff could feel the weight of Megan's words pressing down on him, and the reality of the situation began to sink in. He wasn't just fighting for the dealership's identity anymore. He was fighting for his job. Megan, we're doing everything we can, Maria spoke up, her voice a mixture of frustration and determination. The community is responding to what we're offering. People are coming in, they're engaged, and they're talking about it. They're not just buying cars, they're buying into the mission. That's the kind of growth that matters. And we're seeing it. It's just going to take time. Megan looked at Maria for a moment, her gaze softening slightly. I get it, Maria, but time is something we're running out of. I'm not saying abandon your approach, but I am saying that if you want to keep your position, you need to show us results, fast. The conversation ended on a tense note, with Megan leaving the room and Jeff feeling a sense of dread that he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the first real conflict between his team's vision and corporate's demands, and it was clear that the two were on a collision course. As the days passed, Jeff couldn't shake the weight of Megan's words. He spent hours pacing his office, trying to figure out how to navigate this delicate situation. Could they truly change corporate's mindset? Could they continue to grow their community-focused model while meeting corporate's expectations? Or would they have to sacrifice what they had worked so hard to build? He couldn't stop thinking about the promise they had made to themselves, that this dealership would be a space for innovation and change, not just a sales floor. He didn't want to let go of that vision. It wasn't until that weekend, as Jeff was reviewing customer feedback forms and sales projections, that he had an epiphany. It was clear that he couldn't wait for corporate to catch up. If they wanted to truly make a difference, they would have to lead the change themselves. They had the community, they had the momentum, and now they needed to start driving the conversation forward, no matter the cost. Monday morning came quickly, and Jeff gathered his team once more. We've been backed into a corner, he said, looking around the room. Corporate wants results, and they want them now. But we've got something they don't. We have a vision, a movement, and we're not going to let go of that. Tom raised an eyebrow. So what's the plan? We take control, Jeff said, his voice filled with resolve. We're going to make our own way. We'll show them that growth doesn't have to come at the expense of our values. We'll drive the change ourselves, whether corporate gets on board or not. The team sat in silence for a moment, each person processing Jeff's words. Finally, Maria spoke. You're right, Jeff. We've been trying to meet their expectations, but it's time we set our own. With a collective nod, the team set their sights on the future, knowing that the road ahead would be uncertain, but they were ready to take the leap. The days following the meeting with Megan Richards were filled with tension. Jeff couldn't shake the words she had left him with. If the numbers don't change, you might not have a position much longer. He understood the stakes were high, but for the first time, the stakes weren't just about his job. They were about the very future of the dealership and the community they were trying to build. He spent hours at night, staring at spreadsheets, listening to customer feedback, and reviewing their campaign efforts. The growth was happening, but it was slow, more gradual than the aggressive acceleration corporate expected. He knew it would take time to shift people's perceptions of Tesla, especially when they were so used to thinking of it as a luxury vehicle brand rather than a sustainable solution for the future. On Monday morning, Jeff gathered the team for their usual meeting. There was a different energy in the room this time. Everyone knew that they were at a tipping point. The choices they made over the next few weeks would determine the future of the dealership and potentially their careers. "We can't keep going back and forth like this," Jeff started, his voice firm. "Corporate wants results, and they want them fast. We know we can't just push for sales without delivering the experience that sets us apart. But we're not going to sacrifice everything we've worked for just to meet some arbitrary targets." Tom nodded, his fingers drumming on the table. "So, what's the plan? Do we just try to meet their numbers, or do we push for what we believe in?" "We push for what we believe in," Jeff replied, his voice resolute. "But we do it with the data to back it up. We're not going to let corporate dictate what success looks like. We're going to prove that community engagement and sustainability are the future of growth." Maria leaned forward, her eyes full of conviction. "We need to amplify our message. More events, more collaborations, more community outreach. We need to build something that's impossible to ignore. And we need to track every bit of it, every customer interaction, every sale, every workshop. If we can show corporate that we're not just making a difference, but that we're creating a movement, they'll have no choice but to see it." Jeff smiled, a surge of energy running through him. This was it. This was the moment when they would stop being passive recipients of corporate demands and become the leaders of their own path. "Exactly," Jeff said. "It's time we stopped reacting and started taking control of the narrative. We're not just selling cars. We're changing the way people think about transportation, and we can prove it." The team began to discuss their new approach. They would intensify their efforts to engage the community, not just through workshops, but by partnering with local businesses and organizations to host sustainability events, car-sharing programs, and green energy talks. They would reach out to schools and universities to start offering electric vehicle courses and career guidance programs. They would bring influencers and thought leaders into the fold, showing that Tesla was not just a brand. It was a lifestyle, a movement for the future. But they would also be smart. They would track everything, every event, every conversation, every customer's feedback. They knew that if they were going to face corporate again, they would need hard data to back up their vision. They couldn't afford to rely on just their passion alone. They needed proof. As the weeks went on, the energy at the dealership shifted. Every member of the team threw themselves into the work with a renewed sense of purpose. The workshops became more packed, the community outreach more vibrant. It wasn't long before local businesses began to take notice, offering to collaborate with the dealership on sustainability initiatives. Customers weren't just coming in to test drive cars. They were coming in to learn, to be a part of the community. The dealership became a hub for forward-thinking individuals, and the sense of belonging grew stronger with each passing day. One Friday afternoon, Jeff sat in his office, staring out the window. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was on the right path. They had poured everything they had into this new direction, and it was beginning to pay off. The results were starting to show, slowly but surely. But just as he was beginning to feel a sense of accomplishment, his phone buzzed. It was an email from Megan Richards. His heart sank. Subject: urgent. Meeting request. "Jeff," the email began, "I've reviewed the latest numbers, and while I appreciate the community efforts, we are not seeing the sales growth we need. We need to have a sit-down as soon as possible. Corporate is still concerned. I'll be in town on Monday. Let's meet at 10 a.m. The email sent a cold shiver down Jeff's spine. They had given it everything, but was it enough? He thought about the passion that had fueled their mission, how far they had come, how much they had changed. And yet, was it enough for corporate to buy in? He sat for a moment, his mind racing. But then he thought about the work they'd done, about the customers they had touched. This wasn't just about hitting numbers. It was about creating something that could change the world. And if corporate couldn't see that, then maybe it was time to walk away. Monday morning came faster than Jeff had hoped. The team gathered early, their faces a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Everyone knew what was at stake. This meeting with Megan could determine everything. As 10 a.m. approached, Jeff stood outside the dealership, watching the first rays of sunlight bounce off the rows of Teslas in the parking lot. He felt a mixture of calm and resolve. This was it, the moment when everything would either fall into place or come crashing down. Megan arrived promptly, and they sat down in the conference room. Her expression was hard to read, but Jeff could tell she was already formulating her thoughts. "I've gone through the numbers," Megan began, "and the growth in community engagement is evident. But it's still not enough to meet corporate's expectations. We need to see more sales. We need more customers coming through the door." "Let me stop you right there, Megan," Jeff interjected, his voice firm. "We've been showing up every day for the past month, pouring ourselves into this new direction, and it's starting to work. Our customers aren't just buying cars, they're joining a movement. They're coming to us because they believe in what we stand for. This is the future, and we have the data to back it up." Megan raised an eyebrow. "I see, but I still need to see the numbers. If you can't show growth, this conversation is going to be over pretty quickly." Jeff took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "Then I guess we're at a crossroads, Megan. We've worked too hard to sacrifice what we've built for the sake of numbers. We believe in what we're doing here. And if corporate can't see that, then maybe it's time we find another way forward. Because we're not going to compromise our vision." For a moment, Megan was silent, her gaze locked on Jeff. It was a tense, uncomfortable silence, but Jeff stood his ground. He had no other choice. Finally, Megan spoke. "I didn't think I'd hear that from you, Jeff. But maybe it's time I take a closer look at what you're doing here. Let me review the data again. But if corporate doesn't come around, then you'll need to find a way to make it work with what we have." Jeff nodded, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. The future was still unclear, but he had made his stand. They had made their stand. And now, the next chapter of the journey would unfold, one way or another. The tension in the dealership had been building steadily since Jeff's meeting with Megan. It wasn't just the pressure of corporate's expectations, it was the weight of the decision he'd made. To stand firm meant risking everything, but at the same time, it felt like the only option. Jeff had spent years working to create something meaningful, something different, and now it was time to prove that this wasn't just a fleeting dream. This was a movement, and movements couldn't be stopped by numbers alone. Over the next few days, things began to shift. The dealership's community engagement efforts were having a ripple effect, even beyond the immediate local area. More and more people were signing up for their workshops, attending their sustainability events, and showing up for test drives. There was a buzz in the air, a sense of momentum that Jeff hadn't felt in a long time. It was working. They were starting to build the kind of loyal, passionate customer base that corporate had always dreamed of. But the real tipping point came on a Wednesday afternoon. Jeff had just returned from a meeting with a local environmental group where they had discussed collaborating on an event to promote sustainable living. As he walked into his office, he noticed an email notification from Megan. His heart sank. It had been 3 days since their last conversation, and he had been waiting for some kind of response, hoping that corporate might start to see the value in what they were doing. He opened the email, his fingers hovering over the keys. It was short, to the point. Subject: urgent meeting request. "Jeff, we need to meet in person. I'll be in town on Friday. Please ensure you're available. Corporate wants a full report on the dealership's progress by the end of the week. We'll be discussing the future direction of the store." The email was concise, but the implications were clear. This was it. They were either going to make it or break it. Corporate was coming to assess the situation in person, and Jeff knew this meeting would determine their fate. For the rest of the day, Jeff couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was a strange mix of excitement and dread. He had fought hard to get here, to make this dealership something more than just a sales floor. But now, everything was riding on this meeting. Could they convince corporate to buy into their vision? Or would they be forced to abandon everything they'd worked for? That night, Jeff stayed late at the dealership, going over the numbers once again. He combed through the sales reports, customer feedback, and data from the community events. He wasn't just looking for numbers that showed success. He was looking for something deeper, something that proved that what they were building was sustainable in the long term. He didn't want to just impress corporate. He wanted to show them that this was the future. By the time Friday rolled around, Jeff was prepared. He had every report, every piece of data, and every testimonial from their customers lined up. He knew he had done everything he could. All that was left was the meeting. Megan arrived at 10 a.m., and the atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Jeff, Maria, and Tom were already seated, and Megan wasted no time in getting down to business. "I've reviewed the reports," Megan began, her tone clipped and professional. "And while I see that you've made some progress, there are still concerns. Corporate has been clear. We need to see results in terms of sales. The community events are great, but they don't translate to immediate sales growth." Jeff's stomach tightened, but he wasn't about to back down. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to let corporate's pressure shake him. "We've always known this wasn't going to be a quick fix," Jeff replied. "But what we've built here is more than just a dealership. It's a hub for innovation. People are coming in because they believe in what we're doing, not just because they want to buy a car. That's the difference between us and every other dealership out there." Maria jumped in, her voice steady and confident. "We've been tracking customer engagement, and it's clear that the people who come to our events are more likely to buy. It's not an instant sale, but it's a process. We're building relationships that last. We're changing the way people think about electric vehicles." Megan listened, but there was skepticism in her eyes. "I understand the long-term vision, but corporate wants to see numbers now. We're looking at this from a business standpoint, not just an idealistic one. If you can't prove that this approach is driving sales, we'll have no choice but to reconsider the dealership's future." The room fell silent. Jeff could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, but there was something in his chest that told him not to give up. Not yet. They had worked too hard to let go of their dream now. He stood up slowly, gathering his thoughts. "Megan, I've always respected what Tesla stands for, and I still believe in the mission. But we're not just chasing sales. We're building something that goes beyond the numbers. What we're doing here is about more than just turning a profit. It's about creating a community, about inspiring change, and about setting a new standard for the future of transportation. If we compromise that, then we're just another dealership." There was a long pause as Megan processed his words. She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, Jeff thought he might have crossed a line. But then she stood up, her eyes meeting his. "You've made your point, Jeff," she said, her voice softer now. "And I can't deny that there's something powerful happening here. You've proven that your community efforts are resonating. But corporate is still concerned. They want to see immediate results, or they won't invest further resources into this location." Jeff felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. It was the ultimatum he had feared, but he wasn't about to let it end here. Not without a fight. "I'm willing to take that risk," Jeff said firmly. "If corporate can't see what we're building here, then maybe this isn't the right fit for us. But I know we're on the right path. And I believe that in the end, the customers will show us the way." Megan looked at him for a long moment, as though weighing his words. Then, finally, she nodded. "I'll take your position back to corporate. I can't make any promises, but I'll push for you. You've earned that." The room exhaled collectively. There was no resolution yet, but Jeff had made his stand. They had shown corporate that they weren't just interested in making sales, they were interested in making a difference. Whether or not corporate would come around remained to be seen, but Jeff knew one thing for sure. They had fought for their vision, and that was worth more than any number. The days following the meeting with Megan were a blur for Jeff. The uncertainty of corporate's decision hung over him like a dark cloud, but he had done everything he could. His team had poured their hearts into the community outreach efforts, and they had turned the dealership into something that felt more like a movement than just a place to buy cars. He had fought for their vision, and now the ball was in corporate's court. Every morning, Jeff woke up with a feeling of both anticipation and dread. He spent his days checking his email, refreshing his inbox, but there was nothing. No updates, no news. The silence was unbearable. It was like they were all waiting for a storm to break. But as the days dragged on, Jeff began to notice something. He wasn't alone in this anymore. The team had come together like never before, supporting each other through the uncertainty. They had all taken a leap of faith, and they weren't backing down. One afternoon, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Jeff's phone buzzed. It was an email from Megan. Subject: Meeting scheduled. Jeff, I've arranged a meeting for Monday morning at 9 a.m. Please be there. Corporate has made their decision. They want to discuss the future of the dealership. The message was short, but it was enough to send Jeff's heart into overdrive. The decision had been made. Now, all he could do was wait for Monday. That night, Jeff sat in his office long after the dealership had closed. The silence in the building was deafening. It was a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of the previous weeks, when the showroom had been filled with people, energy, and excitement. Now, it was empty, just a shell of what they had worked so hard to create. Jeff leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, replaying everything that had happened. The highs, the lows, the moments of doubt, and the flashes of hope. He had put everything into this, and now it was all coming to a head. As he reflected on the journey, his mind kept returning to one thought. Is this it? Is this where it all ends? He didn't know the answer yet, but there was a part of him that couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Regardless of the outcome, they had built something worth fighting for. They had created something that could change the way people thought about electric vehicles, about sustainability, and about the future of transportation. That, in itself, was something to be proud of. The next morning, Jeff arrived at the dealership early, his stomach a knot of nerves. The team was already gathered in the conference room, their faces a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. They all knew that today could change everything. I know we're all on edge, Jeff began, addressing the group, but we've done everything we could. We've given this our all. Now, all we can do is wait for the decision. Maria nodded, her usual confidence shaken. Whatever happens, we've built something real here. We've connected with people in a way that goes beyond just selling cars. That's worth something. Tom, usually the most pragmatic of the group, added. We've got to keep that in mind. No matter what corporate decides, we've created something that no one can take away from us. Jeff smiled at his team, feeling a surge of gratitude. They were right. No matter the outcome, they had already won in some ways. They had built a community, forged bonds with their customers, and stayed true to their values. That, in itself, was a victory. At 9 a.m. sharp, Jeff walked into the conference room, where Megan was already waiting. Her expression was neutral, but Jeff could sense the weight of the moment in the air. He took a seat across from her, his heart pounding in his chest. Megan, Jeff began, his voice steady despite the nerves churning inside. I appreciate you making the time to meet today. I know corporate's decision is going to be crucial for the dealership, but I want you to know that whatever happens, we've given this everything we've got. Megan didn't respond immediately. She opened a folder in front of her, glancing over a few documents before looking up at Jeff. You've certainly made an impression, she said slowly. Your community engagement efforts have been impressive, and there's no doubt that you've built a loyal customer base. But as you know, corporate's primary concern has always been sales. They're not just looking at numbers, they're looking at long-term viability. Jeff nodded, holding his breath. This was it. This was the moment that would determine everything. I understand, Jeff said, trying to keep his voice calm. We've always known that growth would take time, but we also know that we're building something sustainable. We're creating a future where people don't just buy cars, they buy into a lifestyle. A lifestyle that's about sustainability, innovation, and making a real difference. Megan looked at him, her expression unreadable. Corporate agrees with that, but they also need to see more. They need to see a clear path forward. They need to know that the dealership can continue to grow and be profitable. We've had discussions, and they've agreed to give you a final chance to prove that your approach can work. Jeff's heart skipped a beat. A final chance? Your plan is solid, Jeff, Megan continued, but we need to see results. Not just engagement, but actual sales growth. If you can show us that this approach can translate to real numbers, we'll give you the resources and support you need. If not, we'll have to reconsider the future of the dealership. Jeff's mind raced. It wasn't an outright rejection, but it wasn't a guarantee either. There was a catch, a condition. They had one last chance to prove their model could work. He could feel the pressure mounting, but at the same time, a part of him knew that this was what they had been working toward. They had already started to see the shift. This was the moment they had been waiting for. I understand, Jeff said, his voice steady. We'll make it happen. We'll show you the results. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Megan nodded, closing the folder in front of her. I'll be in touch soon with the next steps. You've got one last shot. Don't waste it. As Jeff left the conference room, he felt a strange mix of relief and tension. It wasn't over yet. They had one last chance to prove themselves. But the road ahead was clearer now. He knew what they needed to do, and he was ready to give everything to make it work. The future was still uncertain, but Jeff was more determined than ever. This was their moment. This was their chance to show the world that they weren't just a dealership, they were the future. The following weeks were a blur of activity. After the meeting with Megan, Jeff and his team were more focused than ever. They had one final chance to prove themselves, to show corporate that their approach wasn't just a dream but a viable future for the dealership. The pressure was immense, but Jeff could feel the energy in the air. His team was all in. They were committed, no longer just working for a paycheck, but working to make a lasting change. Jeff sat in his office late one evening, staring at the glowing screen in front of him. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, ready to type out the final presentation he had prepared. It had to be perfect. Every statistic, every piece of data, every customer testimonial had to show that their vision was more than just a fad. It had to demonstrate that they were building something sustainable, something that could stand the test of time. Maria and Tom had been working relentlessly behind the scenes. Maria had reached out to every one of their loyal customers, asking for feedback and stories about how the dealership had impacted their lives. She'd received hundreds of responses, each one more powerful than the last. Tom, ever the strategist, had worked tirelessly to refine their sales data, showing how engagement was starting to convert into real sales. The numbers were slowly but surely moving in the right direction, but they needed a breakthrough, a sign that they weren't just spinning their wheels. It was now or never. The email from Megan had come through a few days ago, confirming that corporate would be visiting the dealership in just a few days to review the final report. The team had been working nonstop to prepare, knowing that this would be their moment to shine. As Jeff clicked save on the final draft of their presentation, he leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The moment of truth was almost here. On the morning of the meeting, the dealership felt different. There was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air, and Jeff could see the nervous energy in his team. Maria was at the front desk, her usual smile replaced by a look of concentration as she reviewed the list of customers who had agreed to attend the meeting. Tom was pacing in the back office, double-checking the sales data one more time. "Everything's ready, Jeff," Maria said as she approached his office. "We've got the customer testimonials lined up, the sales reports are solid, and the event schedule is packed. I think we're good to go." Jeff nodded, trying to ignore the tightness in his chest. "Thanks, Maria. I know this is a lot of pressure on all of us, but we've done everything we can. Now we just need to let the numbers speak for themselves." At 10 a.m., Megan and a group of corporate executives arrived at the dealership. The atmosphere shifted from anticipation to a quiet, tense energy. The team gathered in the conference room, and everyone took their seats as Megan entered, followed by the corporate representatives. There was an air of formality to the meeting, but underneath it, Jeff could feel a sense of urgency from everyone in the room. This was it, the final test. Megan smiled as she sat down at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see that the preparations are complete. We're here today to review the final report and determine the future of this dealership." The room was silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on Jeff, but he remained calm. This was what they had worked for. He knew that the time had come to show corporate that their approach wasn't just a passing trend. It was the future of Tesla dealerships. "Jeff, why don't you start by walking us through the highlights of your final report?" Megan asked, her voice steady. With a deep breath, Jeff stood up and began the presentation. He talked about the community events, the workshops, the focus on sustainability, and how all of it had contributed to building a strong, loyal customer base. He walked them through the data showing how customer engagement was rising steadily and how the dealership had increased its foot traffic in a way that no one had expected. "We're not just selling cars here," Jeff said, his voice gaining strength. "We're building relationships. We're creating a culture around Tesla that people want to be a part of. And that culture is starting to pay off. We've seen steady sales growth, And we've got a customer base that's not just looking for the latest model. They're looking for a brand that represents their values. And that's what we're offering here. Maria took over, sharing stories from customers who had been deeply impacted by the dealership's community focus. They spoke about the workshops that had helped them understand electric vehicles better, the support they had received when they were uncertain about making the transition to electric, and the sense of belonging they felt when they entered the dealership. "We're not just a place to buy a car," Maria said. "We're a place to learn, to connect, and to be part of something bigger." And our customers recognize that. They're not just buying a car, they're buying into a future they believe in. Tom stood up next, walking the corporate team through the sales data. "We've seen an uptick in sales over the last quarter, and while it's not a meteoric rise, it's steady. We've also tracked customer retention, and the results are clear. Our customers are coming back for more. They're not just walking through the door once and leaving. They're coming back for service, for advice, and for the community that we've built." Jeff could see the corporate team listening intently, some nodding as they took in the information. There was still doubt in their eyes, but Jeff could sense the shift. They were starting to see the picture they had painted, a picture of a dealership that wasn't just a transactional space, but a transformative one. Finally, Megan spoke, her tone more measured than before. "I can see that you've put a lot of effort into this, Jeff. The customer engagement is impressive, and I can't deny that the community focus is resonating. But corporate still needs to see continued sales growth to ensure that this is a sustainable model. We can't afford to take risks on something that doesn't show long-term potential." Jeff's heart sank. The stakes had never been higher. But just as he was about to speak, one of the corporate executives, a woman who had been quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. "I've been listening carefully," she said, "and I think we're missing something here. We've been so focused on the numbers that we've ignored the human element of this dealership. What Jeff and his team have done here goes beyond just sales. It's about building a loyal, passionate customer base. It's about creating something people want to be part of. And that's not something you can quantify with just numbers." There was a long pause. Then, another corporate representative nodded in agreement. "I think she's right. We need to be looking at this as more than just short-term gains. There's real potential here." Megan looked around at her colleagues, and then back at Jeff. "All right, Jeff. We'll give you one more quarter to prove that this approach can continue to grow. If the results hold steady, we'll support this model going forward." The room went quiet. Jeff's heart raced. He had done it. They had done it. "Thank you," Jeff said, his voice thick with emotion. "You won't regret this." As the meeting wrapped up, Jeff felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had one more chance, but it wasn't just about proving the numbers. It was about proving that what they had built was real. And now, they had the opportunity to show the world that they were not just selling cars. They were selling a vision. The future of the dealership had never been more uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?